Sometimes, dealing with Nicole felt like taking care of an overenthusiastic child. Nicole grabbed Alice's hand, shaking it wildly as she pouted and whined, "No, Alice, my dearest Alice, just help me out. I can't sleep if I don't figure this out. This school is so expensive. Every second wasted feels like burning money." Alice sighed, half amused, half exasperated. All right. Let me see." She pushed Nicole off gently and sat in the chair, focusing on the calculus problem Nicole had been struggling with. Meanwhile, Nicole, standing nearby, noticed the small bag still clutched in Alice's hand. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a small piece of chocolate. Unwrapping it, she popped half of it into her mouth with a satisfying crunch. As she chewed, something about the packaging caught her eye. It looked strangely familiar, like she'd seen it somewhere online before. Frowning, Nicole grabbed her phone and did a quick search. Edible gold packaging. Black truffle infused. Retail price, $2,600 per piece. She stared at the screen. Oh, wait, there's a typo, she thought. But as she double-checked, her heart sank. The decimal hadn't moved. $2,600 per piece. Her brain short-circuited for a full second. Then she let out a dramatic wail, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Wait, what is this?" With trembling hands, she held up the half-eaten chocolate and offered it back to Alice, her voice quivering with guilt and desperation. "Alice. I'm so sorry. I'll give you back the other half, okay? Can you give me a discount or something?" Nicole's eyes shimmered with tears, her voice breaking as she chewed reluctantly, unable to spit it out but also unable to swallow the $1,300 bite she'd just taken. "Ugh. I just ate a smartphone." Alice finally looked up from the math problem, bewildered by Nicole's outburst. "What's wrong? Is it that good? Are you crying because it's that delicious?" Alice lay in her bed, her Mickey Mouse print blanket tucked around her as she stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She couldn't stop thinking about it. The bag of snacks Lemieux had casually handed her, apparently just leftovers, was worth tens of thousands of dollars. Even the small designer bag it came in was more expensive than an entire year's tuition. Holding it in her hands had felt like holding fire. Alice sighed, flipping onto her side, her thoughts swirling. How could she possibly return something like this? She had no way of contacting Lemieux, no phone number, no address, not even a full name. The only thing she knew was that she'd met her through Tony Stark. For now, all she could do was wait. Wait for her to reach out first. The night was serene, the stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. From above the cloud layer, the starlight seemed impossibly bright, a brilliance that felt almost surreal. Two armored suits streaked across the heavens like missiles, their powerful reactors roaring as they tore through the sound barrier. Each left behind the distinct conical clouds of sonic booms. One suit gleamed in blue and white, Lemieux's Ghost One. The other shone in red and gold, Tony Stark's Mark III. Cruising at a steady Mach 2.3, the pair faced a long journey ahead. It would take roughly 5 hours to reach Afghanistan. By the time they arrived, it would be around 3 p.m. local time. For Lemieux, Afghanistan was a place of mixed emotions, both familiar and distant. It was on this very land of sand and stone that he had re-entered the world, where his second life on Earth began. As he gazed down at the endless expanse of golden desert, a fleeting sense of nostalgia flickered in his heart. But the feeling didn't last long. The sight of refugees scattered across the landscape quickly washed it away. The further they flew, the grimmer the scene below became. At first, there were small clusters of 3 or 4 people, but soon they saw long, winding lines of displaced civilians. Men, women, and children trudged through the desert. Their clothes were torn, their faces gaunt and sunburnt, their eyes filled with either fear or numb resignation. Under the relentless scorching sun, they pressed forward, step by agonizing step. Not long after, the horizon revealed another scene of despair. In the distance, smoke billowed into the air from a small town, the sound of gunfire and explosions echoing faintly even at their altitude. Amidst the chaos, some townsfolk cleaner and better dressed were running frantically across the wasteland. This was Kamira, a town that had recently fallen under the control of the Ten Rings, a terrorist group notorious for its cruelty. The townspeople fleeing the carnage? If their luck didn't hold, they too would eventually join the endless ranks of refugees. Lemieux's heart grew heavy as he surveyed the dire scene below, his thoughts momentarily wandering. For Stark, this mission was about atonement, about righting the wrongs that had stained his company's name. But for Lemieux, it was simpler. There was something about watching suffering from above detached and distant that didn't sit right with him. This wasn't a video game. These were real lives, real people, living on the razor's edge between survival and death. As the town of Kamira loomed closer, Lemieux shifted his attention back to Stark, the golden-red streak flying beside him. "Tony," Lemieux called through the comms, his voice steady but firm, "what's the plan once we touch down?" For a moment, there was only static, then Stark's voice crackled through. "We go in hard, we hit them fast, and we don't stop until they're down." Lemieux smirked behind his helmet. Simple and efficient. But then again, with Iron Man, would you expect anything less? Plus 8 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. If you want to read 8+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash Comment. 11 Comment. Vote. Chapter 2. If you want to read 8+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert great sage gifts /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Ari_Mav. Trophy. The 10 Rings thugs were wreaking havoc, their atrocities laid bare for all to see. Women and children were being dragged away, loaded onto trucks like cattle. Their fates were sealed, they would be sold on the black market, destined to become playthings, forced into the red light districts, or harvested as living organ donors. The men? Some would be forced to fight as expendable cannon fodder, while the rest were executed on the spot. In this lawless land, life was both precious and worthless. The ground was littered with rubble and shattered dreams. Every visible wall was pockmarked with bullet holes, and the streets were strewn with corpses, a haunting reminder of the chaos that reigned. Watching the horrors unfold, Lemieux felt the simulated heart in his chest tighten, as though an invisible hand was squeezing it. A cold, detached killing intent seeped into his thoughts, chilling and unrelenting. Better to be a dog in times of peace than a human in times of war. But in this chaos, were there truly any humans left? No. In this hell, even dogs lived better than these helpless souls. From the Mark III, Tony Stark's enraged voice erupted through the comms. Fuck. And in the next moment, the red and gold suit of armor dove from the skies, anger radiating from every movement. Stark didn't hesitate. He came down hard, landing with a crushing blow that snapped the neck of the first thug he encountered. Before the others could react, his repulsor cannons fired, sending 2 more enemies flying with loud, resounding blasts. The sudden assault sent the 10 Rings lackeys into panic and disarray. They raised their rifles, spraying bullets at the invincible figure, but it was useless. The Mark II's armor shrugged off the gunfire, sparks scattering as the bullets ricocheted harmlessly. Not even a single shot could hinder Stark's relentless advance. Lemieux followed closely behind. The Ghost One descended, its sleek form tearing through the air like a blade. With a sharp click, Lemieux unsheathed the dual-edged greatsword mounted on the armor's back. He dove toward the armed mob below, his blade gleaming menacingly in the sunlight. Ghost One schemed the ground, slicing through the air with a roaring wind shear. The thugs opened fire, their bullets pinging off the Ghost One's reinforced armor like harmless pebbles. Lemieux swung the massive sword with a wide arc, its blade cleaving through the enemy ranks like a scythe through wheat. 3 bodies were sent hurtling through the air, their screams trailing behind them. In a fluid motion, Lemieux propelled Ghost One upward, circling around for another deadly dive. This time, the great sword came down like a judge's gavel, scattering another pair of enemies like broken dolls. The maneuver ended with Ghost One landing squarely beside a truck, where terrified women and children were crammed inside, their faces pale and tear-streaked. One of the remaining terrorists stood frozen by the truck, his AKM trembling in his hands as he stared at the blood-soaked suit of armor before him. Lemieux said nothing. In one swift, calculated motion, he swung the sword. The blade's edge sliced through the man's shoulder, cutting diagonally across his torso. The thug didn't even have time to scream. Blood sprayed from the wound, painting the great sword in streaks of crimson, droplets spattering onto Ghost One's sleek armor. Under the sunlight, the bloodstains looked like blossoming red flowers, grotesque yet eerily beautiful. Ghost One stood amidst the carnage, its presence an unyielding symbol of vengeance and justice. There was no room for mercy here, only retribution for the innocent lives that had been trampled underfoot. A small trace of blood smeared across Ghost One's optical sensors, painting the scene before Lemieux in shades of red. Though sealed inside his vacuum-grade armor, an overwhelming stench of blood seemed to seep into his senses. Lemieux stood, sword in hand, as an immovable shield before the truck. 2 more terrorists charged forward, their intentions clear: to take the hostages and turn them into bargaining chips. Before they could reach the vehicle, Lemieux cut them down, the great sword slicing effortlessly through flesh and bone. Their screams were short-lived, their bodies collapsing in bloodied heaps. No one dared to approach the demonic figure standing before the truck anymore. Meanwhile, Stark had swept through the rest of the battlefield with precision and fury. One repulsor blast after another cleared the remaining terrorists. Among the rubble and chaos, he grabbed a familiar-looking bearded lieutenant, dragging him into the town square. With a quick, dismissive motion, Stark threw the man at the feet of the gathered villagers. "He's yours to deal with." As the villagers turned their gaze to the trembling lieutenant, Stark ascended into the sky with his usual flair, leaving the man to face the justice of the people he had terrorized. Lemieux was about to follow Stark into the air when something unexpected happened. A small hand reached out toward him, holding a wilted plastic flower. At the same time, a soft, nervous voice, cracked and dry from fear, spoke in halting Pashto. Thank you." Lemieux's gaze shifted. A weary-looking mother stood nearby, clutching 2 filthy children close to her. The younger of the 2, a short-haired little boy, had managed to wriggle free from his mother's protective grasp. The boy, trembling but determined, was summoning all his courage to thank the fearsome machine that had saved them. From behind the blood-streaked demonic mask, Lemieux's gaze locked onto the boy. For a moment, he saw himself in those wide, terrified brown eyes. The boy's mother, realizing what her son was doing, rushed forward in panic. She tried to shield the child's eyes, pulling her other child closer to her. Her expression was a mix of terror and desperation, as if staring at the angel of death itself. Lemieux, however, moved with deliberate calm. The bloody visor of Ghost 1 tilted downward, focusing entirely on the boy. Slowly, he reached out, his massive armored hand closing gently around the flower. The electronic voice of Ghost 1 rumbled, low and deep, but unmistakably gentle. Thank you. I like it very much. With that, the flower disappeared into the dimensional storage within the armor's palm. Limu then raised his left arm, and a small missile ejected from his forearm launcher. The mother screamed in terror. Her instincts kicked in as she threw herself onto her children, shielding them with her frail body. She pressed herself to the ground, trembling like a leaf, her face buried in the dust. Her thin frame seemed so fragile, yet her resolve was unyielding no matter the cost, she would protect her children. +8 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 8+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Go and add the new fanfic. Comment. 9 comment. Vote. Chapter 3. If you want to read 8+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert great sage gifts/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, hasty_hyper. Trophy. So this was a mother's love. But why did it leave such a complicated taste in Limu's heart? Was it laughable? Or did it simply hurt too much to watch? Was it admirable? Or just another tragedy, one of countless in this forsaken land? In the end, all that remained was a faint but lingering sadness, a sorrow that refused to fade. Limu didn't say another word. Instead, he dismantled the missile launcher on his arm, carefully unscrewing the tail fin from a projectile, leaving only a small, cylindrical core no longer than a finger's width. A gift, small yet heavy with meaning. He knelt once more and extended the device toward the little boy. A gift in return. Here, tap it, throw it, 20 meters away. His voice was steady, neutral, betraying no emotion. Though Limu wasn't human, he possessed a universal communication ability, able to converse with any living being. And thanks to the great sage, he had long since mastered every language known on earth, reading, writing, and speaking them fluently. The little boy hesitated only for a moment before reaching out from his mother's trembling arms. His tiny fingers curled around the cool metal, his grip tightening as he nodded firmly. What Limu had handed him was a specialized high-explosive grenade, light in weight but devastatingly powerful. It had 2 modes. When launched from a weapon, it detonated on impact. When thrown manually, it triggered after a 3.5-second delay, allowing it to clear out enemies hidden behind walls or obstacles. A single grenade wouldn't be enough to change his fate, nor grant him a future where he could live with dignity. But if the time ever came, he could at least fight back. Or die with dignity, on his own terms. Limu soared upwards once more, leaving the broken battlefield behind. The familiar voice of Tony Stark crackled through the comms, as snarky as ever. Took you long enough, alien. I was starting to think you bailed. Inside his helmet, Limu chuckled softly. He pointed to the tracks in the dirt below a trail leading toward another settlement. With a casual, almost teasing tone, he threw out the bait. Looks like the 10 rings came from that direction. Want to take the lead? Stark didn't hesitate. Obviously. I'm always first. With that, the Mark III blasted forward, streaking through the air like a missile. Minutes later, another town came into view. But unlike the last, this one was already lost. This place wasn't just under attack, it was already fully occupied by the 10 rings. The buildings, the streets, everything had been converted into defensive positions, fortified and heavily armed. And scattered across the open spaces? Stockpiles of weapons and ammunition, crates stacked high. All of them proudly stamped with the unmistakable logo of Stark Industries. Not even hidden, just lying out in the open, as if mocking the man whose hands had built them. Tony gritted his teeth and adjusted his flight path. Lowering his altitude, he prepared for a precision strike, planning to obliterate every last weapon and the bastards who wielded them. But just as he was about to fire, a blur of movement flashed across his vision. Thwom! A deafening explosion tore through the air. A surface-to-air missile had locked onto him. The missile struck center mass, detonating directly against the Mark III's chest plate. The force of the blast sent Stark spinning uncontrollably, fire and shrapnel scattering through the sky. Alarms blared in his helmet. Critical damage. Reactor stability compromised. Auto repair engaged. Shit. Tony struggled to regain control, but the Mark III was plummeting. Right into the heart of enemy territory. Tony Stark plummeted like a falcon struck by an arrow, his Mark III armor spiraling out of control as he crash-landed into the earth below. The missile that had struck him wasn't just any projectile, it was a Stark Industries tank gun-launched missile. As the name suggested, it was a guided missile launched from a tank's main cannon, boasting high initial velocity and automatic target locking. A devastating piece of technology, and now, it had been turned against its own creator. Floating effortlessly in midair, Ghost 1 came to an abrupt halt, its thrusters stabilizing. Lemieux watched as Stark smashed through a building, sending a shockwave of debris rippling outward. Of course, he knew exactly where the missile had come from. That tank had been right there the whole time. Otherwise, why else would I have let Stark take the lead? If you don't set your friends up for a little fun, are you really their friends? I mean, you have to let them have a little fun with their millions of dollars armor. Lemieux opened the comms channel, his voice as calm as ever. So? How's the impact resistance on that new toy? The Human Kinetic Equilibrium Control Device, officially known as the Gravity Field Beta Uniform Human Kinetic Regulation System, was a joint development between Lemieux and Stark. Its purpose? To completely negate physical trauma from high-speed impacts as long as the armor remained intact and energy reserves weren't depleted. Theoretically, it allowed the pilot to take damage like a video game character losing armor integrity instead of suffering real injuries. From the wreckage of a collapsed house, an armored hand suddenly shot up. A strained, but very much alive, voice followed. I'm fine. I'm okay. Stark groaned, shaking off the dust and broken bricks. Armor integrity down 11%, but me? I feel like I just wobbled a little. No injuries at all. Then, after a pause. Ugh, okay, maybe just a little nausea. Lemieux nodded thoughtfully, making a note. JARVIS, collect the Mark II's telemetry data and log it under Human Kinetic Regulation System Field Test Number 001. He tapped a few buttons, disabling Ghost 1's recording function. A rare smile crossed his face. Blackmail material secured. Meanwhile, Stark dragged himself up, shaking off the remaining rubble. But before he could catch his breath, the culprit behind his crash was already repositioning for a second shot. +9 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 8+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Comment. 5 comment. Vote. Chapter 4. If you want to read 10+ chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert seal gif /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, STORM1441. Trophy. But before he could catch his breath, the culprit behind his crash was already repositioning for a second shot. A T-72 tank, stationed on the town's main road, adjusted its aim. The barrel slowly tracked upward, preparing to fire another missile. These ragtag terrorist gunners were laughably slow, though. Lemieux and Stark had chatted for nearly a full minute, and they still hadn't gotten the turret aligned for a second shot. Stark wasn't about to give them the chance. Raising his left arm, a compact missile launcher unfolded from the Mark II's gauntlet. With a sharp whine, a small missile shot forward. Directly toward the tank's turret hatch. It was the same high-explosive model Lemieux had handed to that kid earlier. And as everyone knew, a tank's weakest point is always its top armor. Boom. The missile struck home, penetrating through the hatch before detonating inside the vehicle's confined space. A brief flash, a violent eruption, and then the entire turret was blown clean off, sent flipping several meters into the air. A deafening explosion shattered the battlefield as the tank's turret was violently ripped apart. Molten fire poured into the exposed interior, igniting the remaining ammunition stores. A second detonation followed, far more powerful than the first. With a thunderous roar, the entire tank erupted, sending a massive fireball spiraling skyward like a grotesque firework display. The surrounding terrorists reeled in shock, their instincts momentarily overridden by sheer panic. Then, like disturbed vermin, they scrambled out of cover, weapons raised, desperately trying to retaliate. Some sprayed gunfire toward Stark, their rifles and machine guns spitting rounds ineffectively at his armored frame. Others rushed toward the nearest rocket launchers, hoping to down their aerial predator before it was too late. But Stark didn't intend to give them that chance. With a sharp thrust, the Mark III ascended, plasma jets roaring beneath his feet. Raising both hands, he unleashed twin plasma beams, cutting through the battlefield like surgical scalpels. Their target? The terrorists' open-air munitions stockpile. These fools had learned nothing from his escape through the canyon. Everywhere he looked, ammunition crates lay scattered like a careless farmer's harvest of potatoes and sweet potatoes. It was as if they wanted to die. And so he obliged. The entire stockpile ignited, setting off a chain reaction of explosions. A titanic firestorm consumed the town, turning the landscape into an inferno. The shockwave rippled outward, roaring flames devouring everything in their path. Buildings collapsed, barriers were obliterated, and those unfortunate enough to be caught in the blast radius were instantly incinerated, their bodies reduced to ash and bone fragments. A colossal mushroom cloud bloomed, reaching toward the heavens. The sheer force of the explosion sent shockwaves rolling outward, shaking the very earth. Within the firestorm, Ghost 1 and the Mark III remained unscathed. Lemieux stretched out his hand, his fingers slicing through the surging heat and flames, yet grasping nothing. He could feel the sheer power of destruction, but there was no satisfaction in it. Not really. Without lingering, the two armored figures ignited their thrusters, piercing through the firestorm, leaving behind two streaking contrails against the smoldering sky. As they soared through the air, something caught Lemieux's attention. His visor display zoomed in, auto-locking onto a distant convoy. The image sharpened. A charred, half-burned face stared back at him from across the kilometers. It was him. The leader of the Ten-Ring cell that had once captured Stark. A nameless, pitiful footnote in history. Lemieux recognized him instantly. A pathetic, foolish man who had, despite having Stark in his grasp, somehow managed to let his greatest prize slip away. A walking tragedy, doomed to be a pawn in Obadiah Stane's schemes. Some creatures simply weren't meant to think. Even among non-humans, there existed a hierarchy of intelligence. Lemieux turned away, disinterested. There was no need to intervene. According to the original trajectory of history, this man would soon be disposed of by Stane anyway. A stepping stone was most useful when left in place. But beyond that, Lemieux had no attachment to preserving history. He didn't care whether events unfolded as they originally had or if he reshaped them entirely. What mattered was his own benefit. But the images wouldn't stop flashing in Lemieux's mind. The endless stream of refugees, their faces etched with despair. The rotting corpses, strewn like discarded dolls across the war-torn land. The charred ruins, whispering tales of destruction and lost futures. And above all, those brown eyes. Lemieux let out a soft sigh, his grip on the controls tightening. Great Sage, hack into US military satellites. I want 24/7 surveillance on that man. Acknowledged. If that wretched insect somehow managed to survive, then Lemieux would cross mountains and seas to finish the job himself. That would be our private little romance. As expected, trouble awaited on their way back. Flying over California's airspace, their presence triggered US military response. Two F-22 Raptors scrambled to intercept, streaking across the sky like predatory falcons. Lemieux didn't bother with the formalities. With a sharp maneuver, Ghost 1's plasma thrusters ignited, propelling him into the clouds like a phantom. He was gone before the pilots could even react. Stark, however, wasn't as lucky. Caught in the military's crosshairs, he had to play cat and mouse with the Raptors for a while. Luckily, Colonel Rhodey ran interference, helping him slip away before things got ugly. Both armors had radar-resistant coatings, making them difficult to track. But the glaring heat signature from their plasma thrusters was impossible to hide. Flying too low only made them easier to detect. It was a lesson worth remembering. The next morning, inside an extravagant private mansion, nestled deep within California's elite neighborhoods, a man sat alone in the grand living room, watching the morning news. Obadiah Stane dressed in comfortable loungewear, a thick golden chain hung prominently around his neck, giving him the air of an old-school crime boss. The fireplace crackled, casting flickering shadows across his face. The flames danced, reflecting the storm brewing in his mind. On screen, the news played. A series of powerful explosions rocked Afghanistan last night, devastating a known Ten-Ring stronghold. U.S. military officials have reported sightings of unidentified aerial objects in the area. Obadiah's expression darkened. Yesterday, Stark came to confront me. Today, this. It felt like a slap in the face, a brutal reminder that his hold on Stark was slipping. For years, he had believed he had already won. He had outmaneuvered Stark, kept him chained within his own company, all while pulling strings in the shadows. But now, Stark had been hiding a hand all along. Obadiah let out a slow exhale, his fingers tapping against the armrest. His mind worked through the possibilities. Then, after a long silence, he picked up his phone. Dialed a number he hadn't used in a while. When the line connected, his voice was calm, deliberate, calculated. Get in touch with our friends in Afghanistan. Find out if he's still alive. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators' thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Add this fanfic to your library. Comment. For comment. Vote. Chapter 5. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert when gifs/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, SUGAR0077. Trophy. Get in touch with our friends in Afghanistan, find out if he's still alive. That night, Obadiah Stane personally flew to Afghanistan. By the time he arrived, it was past midnight, the darkest moment before dawn. Under the shroud of night, a convoy of vehicles rumbled toward a dimly lit terrorist camp. 10 minutes later, a black, armored SUV was the first to emerge from the town, speeding away into the darkness. Behind it, a sudden eruption of gunfire filled the air, sharp, relentless, merciless. But within seconds, the cacophony abruptly ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. Moments later, the rest of the convoy caught up to the black SUV. Inside, Obadiah leaned back, unfazed, watching the scenery blur past. He pulled out his satellite phone and issued a single, decisive order. Establish Sector 16 under the arc reactor facility. Summon our best engineers, keep it classified. I want to see a working prototype immediately. The plan proceeds. During dinner, Limu received the confirmation he was expecting. Target eliminated. Due to the time difference, Afghanistan was over 10 hours ahead of the US. By the time Limu received the report, Obadiah had already cleaned up the mess. The summary. The 10 Rings base had been wiped out. Obadiah had recovered the Mark I remnants. Scarface, the supposed leader, had burned to death in his tent. Perfect. Everything was progressing exactly as planned. This one move alone meant that the profits from Stark Industries' stock manipulations would at least quadruple his current capital. The next financial reports would cause another market shift, and Limu had already prepared to exploit it fully. To an ordinary person, money had a limit. At some point, whether you had 10 billion or 100 billion, it was just a meaningless number. No human could spend that much in a lifetime. But Limu wasn't just hoarding wealth for luxury. He needed an immense financial foundation for something far more important. Pioneering new technological advancements. Building more advanced combat gear. Preparing for the inevitable crises of the future. Because this world was filled with threats. Hydra. Alien invaders. Thanos. None of them were pushovers. Superpowers and wealth, why choose just one? If he could have both, why not? Everything in this world could be his wings, pushing him further toward absolute power. Oh my god. What the hell happened to your suits? The sharp, panicked scream came from the underground workshop. Limu barely had time to take another bite of his meal before Pepper's voice echoed through the house. Right. They had just gotten back from obliterating a terrorist stronghold, and neither of them had cleaned up yet. Their armor suits were still covered in bullet holes, scorch marks, and dried blood. It was pretty obvious they had been somewhere dangerous. The moment Limu heard Pepper's sharp voice, his instincts screamed in alarm. Crap. His hand instinctively pressed against his forehead, and the piece of beef tenderloin he had been chewing froze in his mouth. The battle-damaged suits. They had left them in the underground workshop, completely unwashed, unclean, still covered in bullet holes, scorch marks, and dried blood. Great. The living room. A tense silence settled over the three figures sitting around the coffee table. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room. Pepper Potts, still visibly shaken, stared at both men, her eyes reddened from worry. It took her a long moment to steady her breathing, forcing down her emotions. Finally, her voice came out calm but dangerously cold. So. Who's going to explain? I saw bullet holes. I saw blood. Tony Stark tried to play it cool, lounging back in his seat, his fingers tapping against the armrest. He blinked rapidly, clearly nervous, but kept up a casual facade. It's nothing. You've seen worse. Internally, however. I'm the boss. Why do I feel like I have to explain myself? Limu, on the other hand. He nodded along with fake innocence, trying to shift all the blame onto Tony. Yeah, Tony's always like this. Nothing surprising. The atmosphere in the room was as awkward as a student being caught skipping school and dragged to the principal's office. One played dumb. The other tried to shift responsibility. Neither was fooling Pepper. Her cold stare turned to Limu. And you? I saw your big toy covered in blood. Her voice was soft. Her gaze was not. Limu instinctively twirled a lock of his hair, flashing a sheepish grin. Oh, that's not a big toy. It's, a whack-a-mole robot. We just went to Afghanistan, to, whack moles. Pepper's eyes instantly turned red, her expression crumbling into raw distress. Her tears welled up, barely holding back. So you did go to Afghanistan. The news about terrorists and explosions was that you. Her voice broke. That was dangerous. You could have died. Limu turned to Tony, begging for backup with a look that screamed. Go comfort your secretary. Tony glared back, his expression just as desperate. Why should I do it? She's clearly worried about you. Limu glared harder. Bullshit. She's obviously worried about you. A silent battle of wills. Both refused to move. Both refused to take responsibility. Finally, Limu caved first. He was less stubborn than Stark. He sighed, scooting closer to Pepper on the couch. Gently, he took her hand, hesitating. Now what? He had no experience with this kind of thing. After a long pause, he finally said. I promise, no next time. Hopefully, that worked. The air in the room felt heavy, weighed down by the unspoken emotions lingering between them. The fireplace crackled softly, its warm glow casting long shadows on the walls, but it couldn't chase away the tension that had settled between the three of them. Pepper's red-rimmed eyes locked onto Limu's. Her voice was soft, but firm. You promise? Limu nodded, his expression calm. I promise. A harmless, comforting lie. One he never intended to keep. Because next time. If there was a next time. He'd just make sure she never found out. Pepper didn't know the truth. She didn't know that Limu had a non-human physique, that getting shot wouldn't kill him, that he was more resilient than any human alive. She only saw what everyone else saw. A delicate-looking, seemingly fragile young man. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Here. Comment. 8 comment. Vote. Chapter 6. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Black Widow gif/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Ari_Mav. Trophy. She only saw what everyone else saw. A delicate looking, seemingly fragile young man. Because of this form. Because of the way he looked. People always saw him as weak, harmless, needing protection. And so, to protect them from their own fears, he had no choice but to lie. Pepper's gaze shifted to Tony, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But then she hesitated. Because what right did she have? What authority did she have over him? She was just a personal assistant. And he was her boss. Nothing more. Nothing less. Tony noticed her hesitation. He saw the way her fingers curled slightly, the way she bit her lip. And for some reason, it made his chest feel uncomfortably tight. With a sharp inhale, he turned his head away, pretending not to notice. Then, without a word, he stood up, intending to leave. But Lemieux had other plans. The moment Tony moved, a strong grip latched onto his wrist. Tony barely had time to blink before he was yanked back down onto the couch. Hard. What the hell? Tony snapped his head toward Lemieux, his wrist still trapped in the boy's grip. He tried to pull away, but Lemieux's grip didn't budge. It was like trying to wrestle with steel. Lemieux's expression didn't change. He looked at Tony, his golden eyes calm, but firm. Like someone who had seen the same story play out before. His voice was gentle, but unyielding. Say something, Tony. Running works. But running is also cowardly. Whether it's about this. He tilted his chin slightly toward Pepper, who immediately looked away, cheeks turning red. Or anything else in life, you're going to have to face it eventually. Silence. Then. That's not. There's nothing. Two voices spoke at the same time. One male, one female. Both denying it immediately. Tony and Pepper froze, realizing they had just spoken in perfect sync. Their eyes met. And then quickly darted away, flustered. The air between them grew awkward, their thoughts a tangled mess. Tony let out a long sigh, rubbing his forehead. Then, without looking at anyone, he reached for a glass of water, taking a slow sip. Halfway through, his grip loosened slightly, and his eyes became unfocused. Memories. Dark, heavy memories. Began to surface. His voice, when he spoke, was lower, quieter, as if the words were pulling themselves out of his chest. In Afghanistan. I was shot in the chest. They locked me up for 3 months. I thought I was going to die there. He let out a soft, humorless chuckle. I was supposed to die there. Lemieux and Pepper didn't say anything. They simply listened. Tony's grip on the glass tightened, his knuckles turning white. But someone saved me. For a brief moment, his eyes darkened, as if reliving something deeply painful. And in the end, he stayed behind. Forever. The fireplace crackled softly, its warm glow casting long shadows across his face. Somehow, the flames seemed quieter now, as if they didn't even want to interrupt. Finally. Tony lifted his head. His gaze locked onto Pepper's, and for the first time that night. There was no humor in his eyes. No arrogance. No deflections. Only raw, quiet sincerity. I truly believe that what I'm doing is right. His voice was steady, unshaken. The conviction in his words was clear. This wasn't a whim. This wasn't some reckless thrill-seeking adventure. This was his choice. His responsibility. I spent my whole life making weapons. I made billions selling them. But now I want to protect the people who suffered because of me. That's what I have to do. Lemieux watched quietly. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. Instead, he simply smiled. A small, knowing smile. Yesterday, someone pointed at me and asked, "What is your responsibility?" Now, I can finally give her an answer. This is my responsibility. Tony Stark's voice lingered in the air, his words weighed with conviction. But as soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head, as if the intensity of his own emotions was too much to bear. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was being completely honest with himself. Yet deep inside, an uncertainty gnawed at him. Would she understand? Would she accept it? Pepper Potts bit her lip, her gaze flickering away from him. There was a moment of hesitation, a flicker of reluctance, but finally. She gave a slow, reluctant nod. I understand. Her voice was quiet, yet filled with an emotion that was hard to define. She took a deep breath before adding, Tony, just promise me one thing. Don't treat your own life like it doesn't matter. You're not alone in this. There are people who care about you. We. Before she could finish, Tony perked up, interrupting her completely. Great. So you agree? Pepper's expression froze. I need you to do something for me. Tony leaned forward, eyes glinting with that familiar mischievous spark that usually spelled trouble. I need you to sneak into my office at Stark Industries, hack into Obadiah's files, and pull out all the latest shipment records. I'll prepare a decryption USB for you. The data should be in the administrative files or hidden folders. For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then. You've got to be kidding me. Pepper's face instantly darkened, her fury palpable. Her voice was dangerously low, and she crossed her arms, glaring daggers at him. I just barely agreed not to yell at you for risking your life, and now you're asking me to commit corporate espionage. Tony blinked, acting as if her outrage was completely unreasonable. Well, yet. You're the only one who can do it. I refuse. Pepper stood up, arms thrown into the air in exasperation. Tony, still lounging on the couch, casually took a sip of his drink and waved a hand. You'll do it. No, I won't. Yes, you will. No, I won't. 2 days later. Pepper found herself standing outside Tony's office at Stark Industries, clutching a USB stick, feeling entirely betrayed by herself. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him. And yet. Here she was. Doing exactly what he had asked. A few days later, the aftermath. The underground lab was eerily quiet, the air filled with the humming of machinery and the faint smell of coolant and metal. 2 sets of armor stood in the center of the workshop. One, the sleek and imposing red gold Mark III. The other, the ominous blue and white Ghost God armor. Both had been fully repaired, their previous battle damage erased. But data from their recent mission had revealed a concerning issue. Lemieux stood before a floating holographic projection, analyzing the combat logs with narrowed eyes. His fingers moved swiftly, adjusting the projected damage models. On the surface, the Mark III suit had only taken 11% structural damage. At first glance, that number seemed manageable. But when he zoomed in on specific areas, the true issue became alarming. The chest armor where Tony had taken a direct missile hit had sustained 64% destruction. That section of the suit had been one strike away from complete penetration. In other words, the damaged section was practically obliterated. If the same spot took another missile hit, it wouldn't hold up. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Comment. 8 comment. Vote. Chapter 7. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Black Widow gifs/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. In other words, the damaged section was practically obliterated. If the same spot took another missile hit, it wouldn't hold up. To resolve this critical issue, Lemieux unleashed his ultimate weapon. The Great Sage. With its terrifying computational power, the Great Sage completely deconstructed and reconstructed the neural control interface, achieving a leap in technological advancement far beyond conventional methods. Lemieux also took this opportunity to rename the device to something more intuitive: Force Field Generator. Since the entire upgrade process was handled solely by him, Stark had zero say in the naming. Had it been left to just Lemieux and Stark, 2 mere carbon-based life forms, this kind of breakthrough-level reconstruction would have taken months, if not a year or 2. After all, humans have limits. Even slimes do. With the Force Field Generator now upgraded, its range and area of effect could be freely adjusted. Its peak power output, which had already been enhanced once before, was now further amplified. Even its sustained power efficiency had seen a drastic improvement. Not only did it maintain its function of protecting the user, but it now also provided enhanced armor protection. The energy-saving mechanics from the original design remained. By using sensors embedded throughout the armor, the generator could anticipate incoming attacks and deploy the force field at the last possible moment, layering multiple fields to disperse the kinetic energy of incoming threats. Against widespread explosive forces, the system could even distribute the force field across the entire suit for maximum protection. The instant the force field activated, its gravitational effect was so strong that it could momentarily create a vacuum in its immediate surroundings. Fortunately, the armor itself was designed to be airtight and vacuum-sealed, ensuring the wearer wouldn't be affected. Meanwhile, Stark's data extraction USB drive was finally completed. Before the operation, Lemieux insisted on accompanying Pepper to Stark Industries for the infiltration. His official excuse? A simple tour. A perfectly reasonable request. It wouldn't raise Obadiah's suspicions and gave Pepper a convenient cover. In truth, however, he was worried about Pepper's safety, and more importantly, he needed to ensure everything unfolded according to plan. On the way to the company, Lemieux discreetly sent a text to a certain agent working for the ridiculously long-named bureau. Agent Carlson, meet me outside Stark Industries. Remember, unless I approach you first, pretend you don't know me. Previously, Carlson had attempted to gather intel on Stark through Lemieux. Lemieux used the opportunity to obtain Carlson's contact information, telling him that he would reach out when the time was right. That time was now. When Lemieux and Pepper arrived at Stark Industries, Agent Carlson was already seated in the first-floor hallway, maintaining a professional and composed demeanor. The hallway was bustling with employees coming and going. Lemieux and Carlson exchanged a brief glance, but both immediately looked away, walking past each other like complete strangers. Lemieux followed Pepper casually, his gaze wandering around the office space with curiosity. In contrast, Pepper was visibly tense. Sensing her unease, Lemieux gently patted her hand, flashing a small smile to remind her to act natural. XX floor CEO's office. The two arrived at Tony Stark's office without issue. The environment was pleasant, spacious, and well-furnished. A plush leather sofa, a small bed for naps, and a side table stocked with wine and bread sat neatly in one corner. At the center of the room was the main desk and computer, while behind it, a large floor-to-ceiling glass window offered a panoramic view of the factory grounds below. Lemieux recalled that this office was supposed to house one of Howard Stark's legacies, a miniature city model that secretly recorded the structure of a new element. Yet, scanning the room, he saw no sign of it. Most likely, it hadn't been placed here yet. It was probably still collecting dust in some warehouse. Pepper settled into the CEO's chair, nervously licking her dry lips. She powered on the computer, inserted the decryption USB, and watched as the program began running across the screen. This was the first time in her life she had ever done something like this. Her heart pounded wildly. She half expected Obadiah Stane to burst out from the ceiling, a cabinet, or from under the desk at any moment. Meanwhile, Lemieux strolled around the office completely at ease. Passing by the side table, he casually sliced off a small piece of bread and popped it into his mouth. The taste was excellent. A Russian-style Borodinsky bread, filled with walnuts and raisins. The rich wheat aroma, combined with a hint of natural sweetness, made for a perfect bite. Pleased, he promptly sliced off half of the remaining loaf, a good half a pound, and leaned against the table, munching as he observed Pepper at work. Want a piece? No. Pepper rolled her eyes, replying curtly. Still, her tension eased slightly. She wasn't sure whether she should admire Lemieux's composure or be utterly dumbfounded. How can he eat at a time like this? The CEO's computer was successfully unlocked. Pepper scanned through the data drive, searching for the weapon shipment files, but they were nowhere to be found. Instead, she discovered something unexpected. A blueprint of the Mark I armor appeared on the screen, reverse-engineered from the physical model. Alongside it was a modified design based on the Mark I, the Ironmonger. Both reports were submitted by Section 16, with the project being conducted beneath a large arc reactor. However, what truly caught Pepper's breath was the third file. A video message from the Ten Rings, addressed to Obadiah Stane. She clicked on it. The office was dead silent, and without realizing it, she held her breath. The video played in a low, ominous volume. On the screen, masked terrorists in eccentric robes were seen restraining Tony Stark. They were clearly dissatisfied with Obadiah's low payment offer and had refused to kill Stark, demanding a higher price for the job. It was clear now Obadiah had orchestrated the entire attack. Had he agreed to pay the terrorists, Stark would have been dead long ago. Fate was fickle. Life was unpredictable. At this very moment, the prisoner in the video, Tony Stark, was alive, yet the leader of the Ten Rings, standing behind him, had died just days ago. Pepper's face drained of color as she watched the footage. Her fear deepened. A cold chill crawled from the top of her head, down her spine, and into her very bones. She had known Obadiah was illegally selling weapons. But this? He had orchestrated a terrorist attack on Tony Stark. A man this ruthless and cunning had been right beside them all along, flawlessly maintaining the facade of a kind, trustworthy mentor. It was like discovering that your best friend, or a longtime roommate, someone you had trusted and laughed with for years, had secretly harbored a hidden grudge against you. And every night, a pair of unhinged, obsessive eyes had been watching you as you slept. Perhaps it was because you accidentally took a scholarship that should have been theirs 2 years ago. Or because 3 months from now, the two of you were up for the same promotion. Who knows? What mattered was they wanted you dead. And they didn't care how. Poisoning your drink. Sabotaging your brakes. A little accidental push while hiking near a cliff. A rock to the back of your head while fishing. Just the thought alone sent shivers down her spine. The video ended. The office plunged into an even deeper silence. Pepper's heart hammered against her ribs, her head spinning slightly from lack of oxygen. And then... click. The office door suddenly unlocked and swung open. Oh. Lemieux. Pepper. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 8. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Bully Maguire gifts/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. Just as they were extracting classified data, Obadiah Stane suddenly walked in. Pepper. His voice rang out unexpectedly, and for a split second, Pepper nearly screamed. Did you bring him over for a tour? First time in the office after all this time. How do you like it? Obadiah entered with a warm, fatherly smile, a thermos of goji berry tea in hand. He seemed mildly surprised, but far more welcoming than suspicious, as if he was genuinely pleased that Lemieux had come to visit. The company has a great environment. You'll like it here. Pepper's expression was unnaturally stiff as she forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Yeah. Lemieux glanced at her discreetly, signaling her to stay calm. Then, he smoothly turned to Obadiah, beaming with warmth and familiarity. Obi. Fancy seeing you again. I really appreciated your help at the gala last time. Speaking cheerfully, he strolled toward Obadiah, positioning himself casually yet deliberately. Right between him and the desk. Lemieux's eyes narrowed slightly as he smiled. You're right, the company's environment is fantastic. Clean, organized, and incredibly futuristic. Especially this office, I love it. The view behind the desk is amazing. From an investor's perspective, a tidy, well-structured company was already appealing. When it was a trillion-dollar empire. Even more so. Obadiah chuckled heartily, his eyes filled with the fondness of an elder speaking to a younger generation. Setting his thermos down on the desk, he took a seat, completely at ease. Ha ha ha, of course. Tony always picks the best. If you like it, you're always welcome to drop by when you're older. There'll always be a seat for you here. He leaned back slightly, his voice carrying an almost playful tone, like a father indulging a child. Honestly, I look forward to the day we become colleagues. Maybe one day, you'll sit right beside me. His words were gentle, even coaxing, but his intentions were real. Obadiah had been misled by Tony into believing that Lemieux's mother was Howard Stark's adopted daughter. Then, at the recent gala, he had mistaken Lemieux for a timid, easy-to-control individual, someone who wouldn't dare push back if bullied. This misconception had led him to consider pulling Lemieux into his circle. A weak-willed ally, placed high within the company's structure, would make it easier for him to maintain control. Obadiah had another reason for wanting Lemieux on his side. The kid lived in Stark's villa. Who knew what kind of useful intel he could accidentally spill? Seeing the two engaged in such a lively conversation, Pepper finally let out a quiet sigh of relief. She discreetly covered the USB drive with her hand, then carefully switched the screen back to the desktop. Meanwhile, Lemieux cheerfully waved the half-eaten bread in his hand, his eyes sparkling with the unmistakable joy of a foodie. We can talk about the future later. But this bread is amazing. Where did you buy it? Can you tell me? At this point, he had practically devoured the entire thing, leaving only a small corner. Of course, his slime physiology meant he never actually got full, his stomach connected to a dimensional space, allowing him to consume an infinite amount of food. For a slime, food wasn't a necessity for survival. As long as there was energy in the environment, he could passively convert it into magical essence to sustain himself. Eating was just a hobby. Obadiah, amused, leaned back into his seat and pushed the remaining half of the bread toward Lemieux. Lemieux, without the slightest hesitation, happily took it. Seeing this, Obadiah beamed, his expression filled with a kind of mutual understanding, like a seasoned food enthusiast meeting his fellow connoisseur. Of course. This is one of my staple foods. It's from Old John's Bakery. He never disappoints. He gestured with a hand as he explained. Just head one block to the right from the company entrance. Ask around, and someone will point you to Old John's Bakery. It's been there since I was young. Obadiah sighed nostalgically. These days, Old John rarely bakes himself. But the younger bakers he trained have inherited his skills. They're masters of multiple styles from different countries. With a proud smile, he raised a finger. Their bread is generously made, rich in flavor, and very affordable. The one you're eating? Just $8. Weighs 980 grams, enough for 4 to 5 meals. Perfect for a busy workday. He chuckled. If you like it, I can have someone buy more and send them to Tony's place. They don't do deliveries. Lemieux enthusiastically nodded, looking genuinely thrilled. Please buy as many as possible. I love this flavor. Obadiah laughed heartily, his expression kind and doting. Of course, of course. Meanwhile, the data transfer was finally complete. Pepper discreetly removed the USB drive and stood up. All right, Lemieux. We should go, it's getting late. She nodded apologetically to Obadiah, then without wasting another second hurriedly pulled Lemieux along, skillfully maneuvering around Obadiah as they headed for the exit. Obadiah, still all smiles, waved enthusiastically at Lemieux. Come visit again. Next time, I'll take you to the factory. Lots of high-tech toys there, you might like them. Lemieux grinned. Sounds great. But the moment they disappeared down the hallway, Obadiah's expression subtly shifted. His eyes narrowed. Something felt off. Pepper's demeanor had been strange, her reactions, unnatural. A bad feeling gnawed at his gut. Slowly, he walked behind his desk and turned on his computer. The screen looked normal. No open files, no suspicious tabs. Frowning, he moved the mouse around, checking for any traces of activity. Nothing. Wait. This is my login account. The password, it's been breached. A realization struck him like lightning. That BH. She did something. With rage boiling in his chest, Obadiah slammed both hands onto the desk, a loud bang echoing through the office. Then, without hesitation, he stormed toward the exit. First floor. By the time Lemieux and Pepper reached the lobby, Carlson was still waiting for them. For a seasoned agent, he looked surprisingly bored, casually cracking his fingers, as if killing time. Lemieux swallowed the last bite of his bread in 2 quick chews, then tilted his head slightly, signaling for Carlson to follow. Agent Carlson, I need your help. Carlson's demeanor instantly changed, his posture straightening, his movements swift and precise as he fell in step behind Lemieux. Understood. What do you need? Pepper whipped her head around, looking at Lemieux in shock. Agent. Yeah, I called him. Lemieux replied matter-of-factly. He works for the Strategic Homeland Redacted Enforcement and Logistics Division. You can trust him, Tony knows him too. He didn't slow down as he spoke. Carlson, we found something interesting. Take Pepper and assemble a team, she'll explain on the way. Carlson gave a firm nod. Understood. Suddenly his phone buzzed. He glanced down. A text message. Slow down. Keep Pepper safe. Carlson's eyebrows twitched slightly as he looked up at Lemieux, clearly intrigued. Lemieux simply gave him a meaningful nod. With that, the group exited Stark Industries. As they stepped out into the open air, Lemieux without looking back lifted a hand in farewell. It wasn't clear who he was saying goodbye to. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Comment. 6 comment. Vote. Chapter 9. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light, insert Venom gif /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. Obadiah stood at the railing, hands gripping the metal bars as he glared down at the scene below. He watched as Pepper, Lemieux, and Carlson converged, and then, to his mounting frustration, that blue-haired brat casually waved at him, a silent yet unmistakable taunt. Son of a damn agent. They actually called in an agent. His mind raced. They must have stolen evidence from my computer. At the building's entrance, Lemieux turned to Pepper and gave a small wave. Pepper, I'll head back to the villa and tell Tony everything. You handle things on your end, be careful. You. Pepper hesitated. Would it really be safe for Lemieux to go alone? And, was he seriously planning to just walk back? But then, she recalled everything that had happened today. From start to finish, Lemieux had been unnervingly composed, as if he had already anticipated every possible outcome. He had even contacted an agent in advance. Meanwhile, she, a full-grown adult, had been a nervous wreck the entire time. Maybe she was worrying too much. There's still a chance. I still have a chance. Obadiah's expression darkened, his pace quickening as he headed straight for Section 16, the secret lab developing the Ironmonger suit. All he had to do was eliminate Pepper. Eliminate the agent. Eliminate anyone else who might know. Recover the evidence. Stage the entire thing as a robot malfunction. Then everything would be salvageable. For decades, he had weathered countless storms. This was just another hurdle. And as long as there was no concrete evidence, not even the CIA or FBI could legally detain him. Obadiah Stane was no ordinary citizen, no easily crushed pawn. His status. His influence. His connections. They would buy him time, give him leverage. And if push came to shove, he could always trade the suit's technology to the US government or the military for protection. Or flee the country. There were plenty of places to disappear. Plenty of governments willing to harbor a man of his genius in exchange for what he could offer. Hell. Why stop there? If it came to it, why not get rid of Tony Stark as well? As the sole surviving expert on powered armor, he would become an irreplaceable asset. With that kind of value and influence, there would always be people willing to protect him, people who would raise him even higher than he was now. Because this was America. There was no right or wrong. Only power and profit. We can't miniaturize the arc reactor. It's beyond our capabilities. The balding lead scientist, William, spoke with an apologetic grimace, delivering the bad news to Obadiah Stane. A suit without a power source was nothing more than a massive, immobile toy. Obadiah resisted the urge to strangle the man on the spot, his fingers twitching. Then, after a moment of thought, there was only one option left. He would have to take one from Stark. In the shadows, Lemieux extended his right hand, the limb melting into a pale blue vortex. From its depths, a towering, blue and white armor emerged, carrying a massive sword on its back. The ghost armor. With a mechanical click, the armor shifted and reassembled, enveloping Lemieux within its core. The engines roared to life, and in an instant, he shot into the sky, leaving behind a sharp white streak. His destination? Stark's villa. He needed to ensure Stark stayed alive. And at the same time, make sure the arc reactor ended up in Obadiah's hands. This entire Iron Man debut incident was a golden opportunity for profit. He couldn't afford for things to go off course. By the time Lemieux arrived, Obadiah hadn't shown up yet. Stark was alone, emerging from the basement, rummaging for a midnight snack. Lemieux crossed his arms, leaning against the hallway wall, waiting. A few moments later Obadiah finally arrived. Lemieux watched as the man pushed open the front door and strode inside like he owned the place. J.A.R.V.I.S remained silent. After all, Obadiah had access permissions. Without hesitation, Obadiah moved behind the completely unsuspecting Stark. From his pocket, he pulled out a tiny, USB-shaped device. A subsonic neural paralyzer. He placed it near Stark's ear. At that moment, black veins spread across Stark's face, his entire body instantly paralyzed. The effect would last for 15 minutes. Lemieux's eyes gleamed, his fingers instinctively twitching. Good tech. He'd definitely get one for himself later. Obadiah then pulled out a mechanical claw, reached into Stark's chest, and extracted the glowing arc reactor. And then he didn't leave. Instead, he sat down completely at ease and started chatting with the immobilized Stark. Not a shred of urgency. He actually looked relaxed. When I ordered your assassination, I was afraid I was destroying a gold mine. He held the arc reactor up, watching the soft white glow flicker in the dimly lit room. A glimmer of fascination appeared in his eyes. Oh, how beautiful. Obadiah's gaze shifted back to Stark's pale face, his eyes wide, filled with shock, anger, and helplessness. Don't be upset. This will be the greatest legacy you leave behind. His voice was almost soothing, as if trying to comfort a dying man. Then, he sighed. Such a shame. You had to drag Pepper and Lemieux into this. I never planned on killing them. He shook his head, his expression full of mock regret. If only your father had been as selfish as you are. For several minutes, he continued rambling, casually chatting with Stark like an old friend reminiscing over the past. Then, with a satisfied sigh, he finally placed the arc reactor into a briefcase and stood up. And just like that, he strolled out the door, relaxed as if he had just finished a countryside picnic. What was there to say? The elegance of a villain? Lemieux, still leaning against the corner, let out a small sigh. The light from the living room chandelier illuminated one side of his face, while the other remained shrouded in shadow, a perfect diagonal divide between light and dark. What a pity. He had originally intended to let Obadiah live. For the sake of good bread. He swore it. On the honor of all food lovers. But then, Obadiah had looked him right in the eye and said, I want you dead. Well, that meant he had to die first. Simple logic, wasn't it? The quiet clicking of footsteps echoed through the silent living room. Lemieux emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable as he walked toward Stark. Stark was still paralyzed, slumped on the couch. Stopping in front of him, Lemieux gazed down, his voice calm and even. I was about to come back and warn you about this, but it seems I don't have to anymore. Stark's ashen face twitched slightly. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Comment. 10 comment. Vote. Chapter 10. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert j.a.r.v.i.s gif/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, SUGAR0077. Trophy. I was about to come back and warn you about this, but it seems I don't have to anymore. Stark's ashen face twitched slightly. Forcing out a weak smile drained of all energy, he looked almost self-deprecating. His lips parted, as if wanting to say something. But his face was still numb, rendering him mute. Who knew what was running through his mind? Was he mocking himself for ending up in this pathetic state? Or was he cursing himself for being blind to Obadiah's treachery for over a decade? Either way. Lemieux grabbed Stark by the back of his belt, effortlessly hoisting him up like a life-sized action figure. Without a word, he dragged him toward the basement. Once inside, Lemieux pulled out a brand new arc reactor and snapped it into Stark's chest. As the power source clicked into place, Stark's body slowly began to recover from the paralysis. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself upright. J.A.R.V.I.S activate Mark III. Now. The AI immediately complied. Stark staggered to his feet, his expression now one of grim determination. Pepper is in danger. We need to get to her. Now. The Mark III armor responded to his command, rapidly transforming and assembling itself around him. As Tony Stark prepared for battle. As Stark turned his head, expecting to see Lemieux. The space behind him was empty. Lemieux was already gone. His voice, however, came through the armor's built-in comms with infuriating nonchalance. Tony, I'm heading out first. Obadiah's armor lab is beneath a large arc reactor, Section 16. Catch up when you can. As Lemieux soared through the night sky, an old memory surfaced. The last time he returned from Afghanistan, he was chased by US military fighter jets. If Iron Man and Ironmonger started brawling over the city, it wouldn't be something they could keep under wraps. The military would absolutely pick up the disturbance. And if fighter jets got involved mid-battle, well, losing a few pilots tonight would certainly make things interesting. But Lemieux had no intention of directly clashing with the military while he was still laying low and gathering strength. Time to preemptively handle this. J.A.R.V.I.S, patch me through to Colonel James Rhodes. Tony Stark's contact list naturally had Rhodey's number. As for hacking into someone else's system? Not the first time. Won't be the last. A few seconds later, the call connected. Hello? This is Colonel Rhodes. His voice was relaxed, the background filled with rhythmic bass beats, a clear sign that the man was enjoying his evening. Lemieux smirked. So the good Colonel was having a night out. Ah, hello, Colonel. Remember me? It's me, Lemieux. From the other end, Rhodey let out a pleasant laugh. Oh. Hey, kid. Of course, I remember. I heard you've been staying with Stark. How's life in America treating you? Lemieux, grinning, leaned into his headset. Colonel, now's not the time for small talk. Now's not the time for small talk, Colonel. In about 10 minutes, Stark Industries airspace is going to become a battleground. There will be 2, possibly 3 powered armors engaged in combat. If your guys are planning to send in fighter jets, be prepared for a total squad wipe. We take no responsibility for what happens. Good luck. Goodbye. Lemieux ended the call immediately. Rhodey sat stunned, phone still pressed to his ear. The beeping dial tone was the only sound he heard. His half-smile froze, slowly turning into a confused frown. The glass of wine in his hand? Suddenly tasteless. The beautiful woman across from him? No longer appealing. She reached out, trailing her fingers along his chest. What's wrong, darling? Rhodey brushed her hand off without hesitation, standing up. Nothing. Got something to take care of. Without another word, he hurried out the door. Rhodey's fingers tightened around his phone as a string of curses flew through his mind. No big deal. This is a goddamn catastrophe. Shit. What the hell had Stark and that damn kid gotten themselves into this time? Was getting chased by fighter jets last time not enough for them? And what was with that kid's tone? Why did he sound so much like Stark? By the time Lemieux arrived, Pepper and Coulson were leading 5 black-suited agents, marching with determined strides, exuding the intimidating presence of a gang headed for a brawl. As Lemieux adjusted his plasma engine output, he hovered to a stop directly in front of Pepper. The reaction from Coulson and his agents was instantaneous. Seeing the hulking ghost armor suddenly descend upon them, they immediately drew their pistols, snapping into a protective formation around Pepper. Though a flicker of fear flashed across their faces, not one of them backed down. They were professionally trained agents, after all, whether from SHIELD or some other mysterious organization. The ghost armor's piercing blue eyes scanned over the agents, as if assessing a target before an imminent attack. The tension hit its peak. One of the agents flinched, his finger tightening on the trigger out of sheer reflex. Then, Lemieux's voice rang out through the armor's speakers, crisp and unhurried. Relax, fellas. It's me, Coulson. The contrast between the terrifying armor and the casual voice was jarring. Coulson's guarded expression immediately crumbled into one of pure shock. His voice even cracked slightly. It's you. He struggled to process what he was seeing. How the hell was the delicate, seemingly fragile kid he met before now standing in a monstrous, sword-bearing combat armor that radiated absolute menace? This wasn't just unexpected. This was 2 completely opposite extremes. Pepper snapped back to reality first. She hurriedly pressed down on the agent's raised firearms, one by one. Don't shoot. It's him. It's Lemieux. Don't fire. Even an accidental discharge would be bad news. If an agent got injured, it'd be a problem. If Lemieux got hurt, she'd be heartbroken. The ghost armor loomed over the group, cold and unshaken. All right, now's not the time for chit-chat. Obadiah is also in a powered suit. He and Tony are about to start fighting if they haven't already. This isn't a fight normal people can be involved in. Take Pepper and get as far away as possible. Just as his words left his lips, a thunderous explosion erupted from not far away, followed by the rapid, heavy bursts of machine gun fire. Lemieux tilted his head slightly, his voice dry and amused. Oh. Looks like it's already started. And it sounds intense. His plasma thrusters roared to life. I'm heading over to help. You guys? Get moving. Evacuate the area. And with that he blasted toward the battle. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash Creator's thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Here. Comment. 9 comment. Vote. Chapter 11. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert black cat, Felicia Sarah Hardy, gifts/pics here, most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, black chicken. Trophy. Pepper's hands were clenched tightly, her voice trembling with worry and fear as she called out to Lemieux. Wait. Isn't this too dangerous? Her concern wasn't unfounded. A few days ago, Lemieux and Stark had returned from Afghanistan with their armors covered in bullet holes and dried bloodstains. Now, he was heading into another fight, and she couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety in her chest. Through the faceplate of the ghost armor, Lemieux's gaze locked onto Pepper's face, his mind racing. Then, he suddenly spoke. You're right. It's incredibly dangerous. Which is exactly why you should wear this armor and save Tony. I'm confident you can do it. Move quickly. Tony's not exactly great at this. He might not last long. Pepper's mouth opened in disbelief, her words faltering. You're not serious, are you? Absolutely. While Pepper stood there, paralyzed with hesitation, Carlson leaned forward, poking his head into the conversation with an enthusiastic expression. If she won't do it, I'll give it a shot. He seemed genuinely eager, the kind of person who believed they could handle just about anything. After all, as an agent, learning how to operate unusual weapons and gather classified intelligence was practically second nature. Lemieux stepped out of the ghost armor as its plates unfolded with a series of sharp, mechanical clicks. The intricate transformation of the armor drew odd gasps from Carlson and the agents nearby. Lemieux glanced at Carlson with a look that could only be described as skeptical. You? Where does that confidence even come from? Then, with a pointed tone, he added, sorry, it's custom-made strictly personal use. Besides, it wouldn't fit you anyway. Lemieux knew better than to lend his armor to a government agent. He could already imagine finding a few listening devices conveniently planted in it afterward. With that, Lemieux half-shoved, half-guided Pepper into the armor, not giving her time to fully process what was happening. His voice turned stern and righteous, the epitome of moral conviction. It's all up to you now, Pepper. Tony needs your help. You're Stark's savior. The irony wasn't lost on him. It was almost always the hero saving the damsel. Why not flip the script? This time, the beauty would save the hero. JARVIS will guide you during the fight. There's a concentrated anti-armor missile in the left forearm. Just wait for the right moment to fire it, and the battle will be over. He gave her a confident smile, his voice oozing assurance. Trust me, so easy. Pepper, still stunned, didn't have time to argue. Lemieux's comment about the missile wasn't just empty talk either. Tony's Mark armor had the same missile launcher built into its left arm, but he hadn't had time to reload it since Afghanistan. Or rather, he never expected another battle to happen so soon. The combat effectiveness of powered armor largely depended on the weapons it carried. Without weapons, it was essentially a giant, mobile turtle shell. Even so, the odds of Stark losing to the Ironmonger were slim. Why? Because Stark's turtle shell was superior in durability and designed for prolonged engagements. This Mark III wasn't the same one from the original timeline. With the force field generator, it had become a juggernaut of defense, nearly impossible to penetrate. While Stark might struggle to break through the Ironmonger's thick plating, he could outlast Obadiah, grinding him down until his suit ran out of power and ammunition. Obadiah's arc reactor, stolen from Stark, wasn't even at full capacity. It had been drained significantly during Stark's flight to Afghanistan. Meanwhile, Stark's new arc reactor was fully charged 100% power. Pepper was shoved awkwardly into the ghost armor, stumbling and protesting. Ah. Hey. The metal plates shifted and enclosed her in smooth, flowing movements, wrapping her snugly in the suit. Fortunately, the armor was designed to fit someone of Lemieux's size, and without high heels, Pepper was only slightly taller than him. Lucky for her, she wore pants. If she'd been in a skirt, it might have jammed somewhere. But just as the armor began to seal. Ow. Ow. Stop. Wait. Pepper suddenly raised a hand, clutching the faceplate to stop it from closing. My hair is caught. Carlson's expression twitched, and among the agents, someone snorted audibly. Lemieux rolled his eyes, muttering. Go ahead and laugh. I don't care. He had just praised their professionalism, and now this. Slime biology didn't include hair, and Stark himself had short hair. Naturally, the armor had never been designed to account for hair getting caught. With a sigh, Lemieux stood on his tiptoes, carefully untangling the trapped strands. He then pulled a hair tie from his pocket and tied Pepper's hair into a quick ponytail. There. Problem solved. Finally secure in the ghost armor, Pepper ignited the thrusters and took off. With J.A.R.V.I.S.'s assistance, she flew smoothly toward Section 16, the location of the impending battle. Lemieux turned his gaze to the remaining group, Carlson and the 5 agents standing by. Without hesitation, he assumed command, his tone leaving no room for argument. All of you go secure the perimeter. Keep civilians away and prepare for cleanup. Move out immediately. The agents, recognizing his authority at the moment, didn't question him. Lemieux walked purposefully toward the battle, his back to the agents as he barked orders, gesturing with his fingers for emphasis. Keep civilians away, prepare for cleanup, and move now. Calling Carlson wasn't just to play nice after all, Americans didn't care much for soy sauce. No, Carlson's presence was strategic. Aside from protecting Pepper, his expertise in damage control made him invaluable for handling post-battle cleanup. Moreover, Lemieux knew he'd eventually cross paths with Nick Fury and now was as good a time as any to start laying the groundwork. Understood, Carlson replied without hesitation, his demeanor calm and professional. Protecting lives and property was part of his job though, to be fair, property didn't always seem to apply when it came to certain agency activities. The number of times SHIELD had acquired things wasn't exactly small. Carlson quickly directed the 5 agents to fan out, each working to guide civilians to safety and secure the area. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame GA Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Here. Comment. 12 comment. Vote. Chapter 12. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert black cat, Felicia Sarah Hardy, gifts/pics here, most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Shelter 1. Trophy. In a deserted corner, Lemieux activated his unique skill once more. One of his arms melted into a swirling blue vortex, and from within the dimensional space, another ghost armor stepped forth. The Predator ability, part of Lemieux's biological design, allowed him to analyze and replicate objects he had recorded and stored. By studying the ghost armor's construction, he could recreate an identical version using raw materials. That's why, earlier, he had stored 3 sets of raw materials for armor inside his dimensional space not completed suits. The one before him now? Let's call it Ghost Armor 2. Ghost Armor I was currently being piloted by Pepper. Suiting up, Lemieux ignited the armor's thrusters, soaring into the sky to survey the battlefield below. By the time Pepper arrived, the battle between Stark and Obadiah was already raging. In the middle of an open field, 2 titanic figures clashed. One, the sleek and polished red and gold Mark III. The other, the rugged, unpainted Ironmonger, raw and industrial in its design. The Ironmonger was massive, its thighs alone as wide as the Mark III's waist, and it stood nearly twice as tall. Its external hydraulic pumps lent it a crude, post-apocalyptic style, oozing with brute force. Stark fired a repulsor blast from his hand cannon, striking the Ironmonger square in the face. Yet it didn't even flinch. The energy struck like water against stone, leaving no mark. Stark lunged again, throwing a punch, but the Ironmonger didn't even bother to dodge. Instead, it caught Stark's fist mid-air, using its size advantage to hoist the smaller armor upward. With a sudden swing, Obadiah slammed the Mark III into the ground with a thunderous crash, the impact sending cracks through the earth and raising a cloud of dust. Slam. 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 The sound of metal against dirt echoed like a war drum, each blow reverberating with ominous weight. Watching from above, Lemieux couldn't help but think. Stark, what are you doing? Why are you cosplaying Loki? The Mark III was clearly outmatched in raw mechanical strength. Obadiah's Ironmonger outclassed it in both size and brute force. Taking it head-on? That was asking for a beatdown. The scene below was nothing short of a one-sided brawl, Stark's armor being ragdolled like a toy in a child's tantrum. As the battle raged, Pepper's ghost armor finally arrived, its movements still shaky and unsteady. She hovered hesitantly near the edge of the battlefield, watching in equal parts awe and fear as the 2 armored giants clashed below. Pepper's voice rang out over the comms, desperate and trembling with fear as she flew closer to the battlefield. Tony. Tony. I'm here to help. Are you okay? Tony. Her heart pounded wildly in her chest. She had never been in a fight in her life, and now she was piloting a combat suit, facing a life-or-death situation. Watching Stark being tossed around like a ragdoll, her fear threatened to overwhelm her completely. The thin, metallic shell of the ghost armor offered little comfort. Obadiah slammed Stark into the ground once again, the Mark III's armor scraping and sparking against the cracked pavement. Then, with a sneer, he planted a heavy foot on Stark's chest, pinning him down. Bright sparks erupted where the 2 suits clashed. Raising his head, Obadiah spotted Pepper hovering in the air, her movements shaky and uncertain. He glanced back down at Stark beneath his foot and smirked, his tone dripping with mockery. Hey, Tony. Looks like someone's come to save you. But what good will it do? If I can crush you like the bug you are, I can just as easily squash her too. Pepper froze for a moment, staring in panic as Obadiah taunted her. Then. She remembered Lemieux's instructions. The missile. Her left arm had a missile. J.A.R.V.I.S. Fire the missile. Fire now. Lock onto that giant suit. J.A.R.V.I.S. calm voice replied instantly. Target confirmed. Please relax your arm muscles to avoid strain. The ghost armor's left arm raised automatically, a targeting reticle appearing in the center of Pepper's screen. The system locked onto the ironmonger, a red box framing the massive armor. The missile launcher extended from her forearm. Ignition. Launch. The missile roared to life, leaving a white trail of smoke as it streaked toward Obadiah. But then, Pepper watched in horror as Obadiah casually grabbed Stark by the arm, lifting him like a human shield, placing the Mark III directly in the missile's path. Boom. The missile struck Stark's armor, exploding in a blinding flash of fire and light. Pepper's scream tore through the air, a raw and anguished cry. Tony. The explosion's glow flickered in her wide, tear-filled eyes as her heart sank into despair. The world seemed to grow darker, quieter, as if her inner turmoil had cast a shadow over everything. From his vantage point on a nearby rooftop, Lemmy watched the events unfold with an expression hidden behind his faceplate. When the explosion lit up the battlefield, he couldn't help but cover his face with one hand, sighing heavily. Oh, come on. That's just tragic. This outcome? Completely unexpected. The issue wasn't with the missile itself, it wasn't designed for speed but for precision and armor penetration. Unlike kinetic weapons, the missile relied on shaped charges to generate metallic jets that pierced through heavy armor. While slower than other munitions, it was highly effective against tanks and aircraft, which couldn't exactly grab a nearby object to shield themselves. But this was no ordinary battlefield. Obadiah had both the strength and proximity to use Stark as a literal shield, and the ironmonger's hydraulic arms were more than powerful enough to hoist the smaller suit effortlessly. It wasn't a design flaw, just a situation no one had accounted for. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 10 comment. Vote. Chapter 13. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert Rimuru, slime, gifs/pics here, most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Blackheart 99. Trophy. What if Iron Man died here? If Tony Stark died here tonight, what would the future look like? Chaos. Absolute chaos. History would derail completely. Obadiah let out a cold chuckle, then effortlessly hurled Stark aside, sending him crashing through an entire concrete wall. With slow, deliberate steps, he turned his attention to Pepper. But from the rubble behind him, a red and gold armored hand suddenly emerged, clawing its way back to the surface. I'm fine. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. What an inspiring and heart-wrenching moment. Even if buried in an iron coffin, even if cast into the abyss, Tony Stark would still raise his hands to the sky and scream in defiance. Lemieux couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration. This guy. I respect him. Tony Stark has an unbreakable soul. Thanks to the recent upgrades to the force field generator, the anti-armor missile had failed to penetrate the Mark III's plating, which, in hindsight, had been inevitable. The missile's velocity wasn't high, and since it had been stopped midair by the force field, it had actually detonated before making direct contact with the armor. As a result, the metallic jet from the warhead had hit thin air, unable to focus its armor-piercing effect. And even if it had been effective, the force field had already disrupted its kinetic impact, drastically weakening its power. In the end, all it had done was scorch some paint off the Mark III. Gritting her teeth, Pepper ripped the massive greatsword from the ghost armor's back, her voice rising in a desperate battle cry. Ah! Summoning all the courage she had left, she charged at Obadiah, prepared to fight to the death. Her armor stomped against the ground, sending loose debris flying, and as she swung, the blade sliced through the air with a sharp whistle. Obadiah didn't even flinch. Watching her sword descend toward his head, he simply smirked. And then, clang! The blade struck the ironmonger's armor, sending a shower of sparks flying. And bounced off. Useless. Completely useless. This was the 21st century. Did she really think a medieval sword was going to work against a walking war machine? Obadiah snorted, knocking the sword from Pepper's grip with a single backhanded slap. Then, with one massive gauntlet hand, he gripped her helmet, lifting her and the entire suit off the ground until they were eye level. So, armor made for women is just as weak as women themselves. His voice was filled with mocking disdain. Hand over the data you stole. If you do, I might just let you live. And while you're at it, tell me where that agent you brought is hiding. From the rooftop, Lemmy watched the scene unfold, his patience finally running thin. Enough. If he had a few more days, he could have finished his high-energy laser weapon. With that, slicing through the ironmonger's armor would have been as easy as cutting butter. But even now, who said he couldn't cut through it anyway? Stepping forward, Lemmy emerged from the ghost armor, ready to make his move. Great Sage, fully take over the armor system. Let's give the old man a demonstration of our newest trick. Acknowledged. The empty ghost armor too silently drew the massive great sword from its back, vanishing into the shadows of the night. Hey! Obadiah Stane! Look up here! A sharp, familiar voice called out from above. Obadiah instinctively turned his head, his metallic gaze locking onto the source of the sound. Standing atop the reactor rooftop, Lemieux waved a small black USB drive in his hand. Lemieux grinned down at him. The files you want? They're all right here. Let her go, and I'll hand them over. Of course. The USB was fake. But Obadiah didn't know that. His greed and desperation made him fall for the bait instantly. With a dismissive sneer, he flung Pepper aside like garbage, sending her skidding across the ground. Then, igniting his thrusters, he roared into the air, thick black smoke trailing behind him as he ascended to the rooftop. Give it to me. As the ironmonger landed with a heavy metallic thud, the entire rooftop trembled. Obadiah's massive armored frame loomed over Lemieux, a cold steel behemoth, his steps slow and menacing as he closed in. The harsh metallic sheen of his armor gleamed under the moonlight, making him look like a ravenous predator closing in on its prey. Lemieux stepped back, one slow movement at a time. His expression was calm. Indifferent. His gaze met the ironmonger's without a flicker of fear. Step by step, he retreated across the glass skylight of the reactor chamber. Then, he stopped right at the edge. Obadiah, closing in for the kill, lifted his foot. And then, just as his massive armor was about to step onto the fragile skylight, he stopped. A dry chuckle escaped him. You think you can trick me into falling through? His tone was mocking, filled with a sense of cruel amusement. Then, his voice darkened, his smirk curling into something sinister. I misjudged you before. You're neither weak nor harmless. But despite the words, his voice still carried nothing but contempt. As if none of it mattered. But this is where it ends. You and that USB can go meet your maker together. As he spoke, a mechanized panel flipped open on the ironmonger's back, revealing a thick, arm-sized high-explosive missile. Obadiah's voice remained calm, even as he locked onto Lemieux's chest with a red laser sight. Such a shame. You wasted an old man's kindness. The missile ignited, its engines roaring to life. A streak of red-hot fire trailed behind it as it launched, hurtling straight for Lemieux's chest. Plus 10 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 10 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Your gift is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. Comment. 8 comment. Vote. Chapter 14. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police Cars Revolving Light. Insert Diablo, Butler, gifts/pics here. Most likes comment will win Police Cars Revolving Light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. A streak of red-hot fire trailed behind it as it launched, hurtling straight for Lemieux's chest. For a moment, it looked as though Lemieux was doomed. The missile raced toward him, promising instant obliteration, a fiery death with nothing left behind. But God? Sorry, I don't really know him that well. Activating skill, Predator. Lemieux raised a single hand, preparing to let the missile vanish into his dimensional space, neutralizing it effortlessly. Then a sudden shout rang through the battlefield. Stain. A blur of red and gold lunged from the side, interposing itself between Lemieux and the incoming missile. Tony Stark. Wearing the Mark III armor. Throwing himself straight into the blast. He couldn't tackle Lemieux away. He couldn't push him aside. So he did the only thing he could. He took the hit head on. Boom. The missile struck the Mark II's chest, erupting into a fiery explosion. For a moment, Lemieux saw only shadows. A silhouette of a man, burned into the raging inferno. Tony Stark's armor was thrown violently backward, propelled by the blast, rocketing past Lemieux. But in that crucial instant a small, pale hand reached out. A simple pull and press, a flawless redirection. Lemieux's precise movements absorbed and redirected Stark's excess momentum, stabilizing his flight path mid-air. Thanks to this, Tony didn't crash violently into the ground. Instead, he landed on his feet, stumbling but intact. A maneuver born from high-level martial arts techniques, knowledge that great sage had meticulously gathered from the vast archives of the internet. A subtle but perfect application of force redirection. Meanwhile the fire from the explosion washed over Lemieux, scorching the ground, igniting debris and leaving behind waves of intense heat. But not a single strand of his hair was burned. His clothing was charred, yes, but his body? Completely unharmed. A passive skill. Heat and cold resistance. A gift of his unique biology. Across the battlefield, Obadiah Stane stood frozen, watching this impossible scene unfold through his armor's display. His face twisted in disbelief, confusion, and most of all fear. What the hell are you? His voice, meant to be angry, was shaky, betraying his growing terror. This isn't possible. But Lemieux simply waved a hand toward him, his expression calm, almost casual. Like he was simply saying goodbye to a friend before heading home. Goodbye. Take your questions to God. Maybe he'll give you an answer. His voice was soft, but it carried with it an unshakable finality. And just then from behind Obadiah, a shadow rose. A towering blue and white armored figure. Silent. Ghostly. Like a specter of death itself. The ghost armor. Controlled entirely by Great Sage. And it was already in position to deliver the final blow. The ghost armor gripped its massive greatsword, the plasma thrusters on its back flaring to life, emitting a burst of brilliant white light. With a smooth, controlled motion, it spun the greatsword in a full arc, shifting its weight. Then lunged forward, the blade rising from below in a devastating upward slash, aimed directly at the ironmonger's leg joint. Every ounce of force and momentum aligned perfectly. The raw power of the thrusters. The rotational inertia of the blade. The full torque of the armor's twisting motion. The precise strike of the arm movement. Invisible streams of data flowed through the ghost armor's internal systems, calculating and adjusting in real time, creating a perfect synergy of motion and force transmission. Under Great Sage's flawless computational control, the mechanics reached near absolute efficiency, ensuring every unit of energy was channeled into the strike. And then... Stryaik. A deafening screech of metal rending metal tore through the battlefield. A burst of blinding sparks erupted as the great sword cleaved effortlessly into the ironmonger's massive joint. Like a searing blade slicing through butter. The ironmonger's leg thick as an industrial steel pillar was severed in a single swing. The entire limb broke away, crashing onto the rooftop, sending tremors through the structure. At the same time, the great sword itself cracked, its blade chipped and bent from the sheer brutality of the impact. Lemieux's eyes gleamed, his blood thrumming with excitement. A strike that could carve through the thickest armor. A technique that fused the mysticism of Eastern swordsmanship with the precision of modern physics. A battle art only possible thanks to Great Sage's processing power. If only the blade had been sturdier, this technique wouldn't just be an ambush attack. It would have been enough to dismantle the ironmonger in direct combat. Lemieux clenched his fist. One day, I'll forge an even stronger blade. And when that day comes, I'll find a battlefield worthy of it. A true war zone. Where he could stand on the front lines and carve through enemies like grass. With a final, calculated motion, the ghost armor raised its right leg, then slammed a powerful kick into the ironmonger's back. The force tipped Obadiah off balance, sending his now crippled armor toppling. His eyes filled with sheer terror as he realized he was falling. The reinforced glass skylight beneath him had already been shattered from the previous missile explosion. And now he plunged downward. Directly toward the large arc reactor. His mind raced, his hands clawing desperately at the air, but there was nothing to grab. He descended rapidly, gravity pulling him toward oblivion. A micromissile streaked from behind, tracking him as he fell, then detonated, sealing his fate. The reactor below erupted, unleashing a towering white energy column, surging straight into the heavens. For an instant the world fell silent. Then a blinding pillar of pure energy pierced through the stormy sky, illuminating the entire city, turning the black clouds white. The sheer force of the explosion sent ripples through the atmosphere, triggering several cascading bolts of lightning across the sky. Lemieux stood on the rooftop, watching the blinding spectacle unfold, his face bathed in the ethereal glow. This pillar of light reminded him of something. The Bifrost of Asgard. A beacon of divine power, breathtaking in its destructive beauty. A reminder that the timeline is still moving forward. In a year or two, the god of thunder himself would descend upon this world. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 15. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Kazuma Sato gifts/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. In the silence that followed the explosion, a thunderous shockwave ripped through the air, accompanied by an ear-piercing roar. Flames surged out from the reactor chamber like a ravenous beast, climbing skyward under the pressure of the blast, forming a miniature mushroom cloud. The intense air currents created by the massive pressure difference whipped through the surroundings, sending Lemieux's long hair billowing wildly. He stood still, watching the devastation with calm eyes, his thoughts briefly reflecting on the fallen. Obadiah. Whether you were brilliant or foolish, to rise to such a position, you were well, nothing. He shifted his gaze to the monumental column of light that still pierced the heavens. The clanking of heavy footsteps echoed behind him. A red and gold armored hand, scarred by numerous scratches and battle damage, rested on Lemieux's shoulder. It's over. Let's go. Colonel James Rhodes finally arrived, though far too late to intervene. After receiving Lemieux's call, his first stop had been the Air Force Base, where he scrambled to calm the panicked observers, who had reported a mysterious energy surge. Only then did he rush out, taking his personal car in his hurry. The entire drive was a chaotic blur, running countless red lights, weaving through traffic, and leaving a trail of angry curses from frustrated drivers. One particularly furious man had nearly collided with him and even chased him for several blocks. Were it not for Rhodey's speed, the esteemed U.S. colonel might have found himself cornered and punched by an enraged civilian. When he finally arrived, his frustration peaked. The scene that greeted him was nothing short of apocalyptic. Missile-scorched craters. Bullet-riddled walls. Collapsed structures that looked like they'd been rammed by tanks. Human-shaped dents in the ground. And a fading mushroom cloud still looming ominously in the sky. Rhodey froze, utterly overwhelmed by the carnage. "What the foo *K, he exclaimed, running his hand down his face. His voice rose in frustration. "Can someone tell me what the hell happened here?" A sharp intake of breath, then. Foo *K. His face twisted in utter disbelief as his gaze darted from one piece of destruction to the next, desperately trying to make sense of it all. Was this some kind of live military simulation? Or maybe a superhero blockbuster being filmed? Standing before Rhodey were two imposing figures, clad in gleaming, battle-scarred suits of armor. The first was Tony Stark, donning the Mark III, its red and gold plating a striking contrast to the destruction around them. The second was Pepper Potts, wearing a sleek ghost armor, its dark design emanating a menacing aura. For a moment, Rhodey genuinely believed he had stepped onto the set of a high-budget sci-fi film. "What is this?" he muttered to himself, his mind racing. The colonel's voice wavered as he pointed at the two figures. "Don't tell me, is this a preview of some new military tech? Are we filming a trailer here?" His confusion quickly turned into annoyance as the full absurdity of the situation hit him. Unbeknownst to Rhodey, a second ghost armor had already been quietly stashed away by Lemieux. Now, only Stark's Mark III and Pepper's ghost armor remained visible, their powerful and majestic forms towering before Rhodey. He stared at the two suits, the faintest hint of awe creeping into his voice. "I swear, if this is some sci-fi project, I better get a front row seat." Or perhaps it was a time-traveling machine stepping through the massive light column moments ago, here to assassinate John Connor in the past? As the faint clicking sound of armor plates folding back echoed in the air, both suits of armor simultaneously opened, revealing Tony Stark and Pepper Potts. The sight of Stark immediately brought clarity to Rhodey's mind. He recalled the earlier incident where Tony, being chased by military jets, had called him in a panic for help. Everything clicked into place. The colonel's frustrated tirade halted mid-sentence, his demeanor shifting faster than a weather vane in a hurricane. The anger drained from his face, replaced by a mix of envy, admiration, and obsequious awe. Circling around the two suits of armor with wide eyes and a near-religious reverence, he muttered almost to himself, "Wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life." Tony Stark, ever the showman, couldn't resist a smirk. With a self-satisfied but faux humble tone, he responded, "Not bad, right? Two high-tech, whack-a-mole robots. Revolutionary, cutting-edge stuff." As he said this, Tony turned and gave Lemieux a subtle wink, his confidence and composure fully restored after the earlier life-or-death ordeal. But just as he started basking in Rhodey's admiration, Lemieux's voice broke through like a cold breeze, calm and merciless. "All I saw was someone being used as a whack-a-mole by Obadiah." Tony coughed awkwardly, his smugness deflating slightly as he shot Lemieux a side-eye. Pepper, having stepped out of the armor, seemed momentarily stunned by the scene around her. Then, snapping out of her daze, she hurried to Tony's side. Her hands began anxiously patting and probing at his chest and arms as she checked him for injuries. "Are you okay, Tony? That missile it hit you. Are you hurt? Tell me you're not hurt." Her voice quivered with emotion, a faint trace of tears mixed with lingering fear. The image of Tony being struck by the missile kept replaying in her mind like a nightmare she couldn't shake. Unbeknownst to her, both she and Tony were practically unscathed, thanks to the force field generators integrated into their suits. The only injury sustained was a lock of Pepper's hair that had been singed in the chaos. Tony gently grasped her frantically moving hands, his own hands steady and warm. Raising them slightly, he placed them gently on her shoulders and gave her a reassuring pat. "I'm fine," he said softly, his tone calm but soothing. "It's okay." The armor held up. The missile didn't penetrate. His words, spoken with quiet confidence, seemed to ease some of the tension in Pepper's expression. And then, as if following an unspoken cue, Tony slowly pulled her into his arms. Pepper hesitated for a moment before tilting her head upward, her eyes meeting his. Something unspoken passed between them, a fragile but undeniable connection that felt as if it had always been there, waiting for the right moment to surface. The atmosphere grew thick with a peculiar warmth, a quiet intimacy that enveloped the two of them. There was no moon tonight, but the soft glow of the streetlights illuminated their figures. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 11 comment. Vote. Chapter 16. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Kajino_Sora gifts / pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. The atmosphere grew thick with a peculiar warmth, a quiet intimacy that enveloped the two of them. There was no moon tonight, but the soft glow of the streetlights illuminated their figures. Their shadows stretched across the ground, long and narrow, eventually converging into a single, inseparable line in the distance. Pepper tilted her head slightly, her eyes fluttering shut as she seemed to surrender to the moment. Tony, his expression softening, leaned in closer. His heart beat steadily, and for once, it wasn't driven by the adrenaline of combat or the thrill of invention, but by something far more profound. He wanted to kiss her. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to rush it, as though doing so might tarnish the purity of the moment. Tony Stark gazed at the familiar face before him, studying her as if she were a priceless treasure, his treasure. How many women, knowing full well they weren't warriors, would still charge into danger, armed with little more than sheer determination, just to save someone they cared about? Pepper Potts wasn't just his brilliant assistant, an accomplished professional, or a financial genius. She wasn't a fighter. But tonight, her courage had outshone any soldier he'd ever known. Standing a few paces away, Rhodey and Lemieux exchanged a knowing glance and quietly turned their backs, pretending to be blind. Rhodey, however, couldn't help but grimace, his face scrunching up as if he'd bitten into a lemon. He puckered his lips and began to whistle a disjointed, off-key tune. As Tony and Pepper leaned closer, the space between them narrowing with each passing heartbeat, their breaths mingled. It was a fragile, intimate moment that felt as if the universe itself had paused to give them time. But just as their faces were about to touch, a loud voice shattered the moment like glass hitting concrete. Hey! Is anyone injured? Does anyone need medical attention? I've called reinforcements, and there's an ambulance on the way. Tony and Pepper jumped apart as though struck by lightning, their heads swiveling around in search of the source of the interruption. From around the corner came Agent Phil Coulson, panting heavily as he jogged toward them. In one hand, he clutched a communicator, and in the other, a standard-issue pistol. His usually composed demeanor was replaced with visible relief when he saw the group standing unscathed. Oh, thank God, he muttered, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. You're all okay. Praise the heavens. Behind him, the sound of synchronized footsteps grew louder. Within moments, a group of burly paramedics in white uniforms appeared, looking more like off-duty special forces soldiers than medical personnel. Their sharp eyes and muscular builds were complemented by the efficiency of their movements. Following closely behind were nearly a dozen men in sleek black suits, each armed with FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missile launchers, looking like they were prepared to level a building if necessary. For a moment, everyone froze. The scene was so surreal that Tony, Pepper, Rhodey, and Lemieux all found themselves staring at Coulson in stunned silence, their gazes lingering on the absurdly overprepared team behind him. Coulson, sensing the weight of their stares, glanced around nervously, then looked down at his own attire as if checking for something out of place. Finally, he cleared his throat. Did I miss something? Is anyone hurt? Rhodey was the first to break. A snort escaped his lips, quickly escalating into a full-blown laugh. His booming laughter echoed through the night, and he clutched his sides as tears welled in his eyes. Haha, oh man. I don't even know who you are, but I like you already. That was brilliant. You've got style, buddy. You're officially my friend now. Lemieux nodded approvingly, his face uncharacteristically amused. Well done, Coulson. Or should I say, son of Coul. Coulson blinked, clearly baffled. He glanced back at the men he'd brought along, then at the group in front of him. What did I do? As the adrenaline faded and the night wore on, the group gradually began to disperse. Rhodey continued to chuckle under his breath, occasionally throwing playful jabs at Tony. Lemieux, ever the quiet observer, remained calm but couldn't entirely hide his amusement. Tony, meanwhile, shook his head in exasperation as he turned to Pepper. Let's call it a night, shall we? Pepper smiled, her earlier embarrassment giving way to a warm expression. Yes, let's. Lemieux, Tony Stark, and Pepper found a spot in Stark Industries to spend the night. Though not as comfortable as home, they managed to get a decent sleep and regain some energy. In stark contrast, Rhodey and Coulson weren't as lucky. As a military colonel and an agent of SHIELD, they were stuck working through the night, dealing with the aftermath. They had to report to their superiors, write detailed reports, coordinate with various departments, clean up the site, and prepare excuses and testimonies for the media. By morning, they knew the press would swarm in like piranhas smelling blood. The next morning 8:30 a.m. A press conference was set to take place at Stark Industries, in the same venue where Tony Stark had held his last one 6 months ago. With 10 minutes left until the event began, Coulson handed Tony a small note containing the key points SHIELD wanted him to address. Lemieux, meanwhile, sat on a nearby couch, casually flipping through a newspaper while snacking on macadamia nuts. The table in front of him was littered with broken shells, a testament to his boredom. The nuts' thick shells were no match for Lemieux's sharp teeth. To him, cracking them open was as easy as eating sunflower seeds. Last night, the battle between Tony Stark's Mark III armor and the Ironmonger had been caught on camera by passers-by. Despite the chaotic fighting, Tony had gone out of his way to ensure there were no civilian casualties within his ability. The footage of the fight had gone viral, dominating the news. Reports of mysterious machines fighting in the streets and heroic rescues were everywhere. However, the two ONI armors Lemieux had deployed had largely gone unnoticed. Carlson had already led agents to secure the area, and only a handful of people had seen a fleeting glimpse of the blue and white armor. With no clear evidence, it was easy to dismiss the sightings of the ONI armor as mistaken identity or the result of frightened imaginations. No proof, no truth. This worked to their advantage. A hidden weapon is always the sharpest. Lemieux had no intention of following in Tony Stark's footsteps to become a public superhero. While he didn't mind helping civilians or funding charities, he wasn't ready to embrace the mantle of a superhero. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead and unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 10 comment. Vote. Chapter 17. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead and unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light, insert one eye guy gif /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajano_Sora. Trophy. Once Tony schemed through the script handed to him, Carlson began to provide additional explanations. His tone was calm and measured, a voice that spoke of long experience handling such situations. You were on your yacht at the time. Carlson began, his words steady as if reciting a script himself. As for Obadiah Stane, well, let's just say his private plane went down during his vacation. All you need to do is announce that the Iron Man suit is just your personal bodyguard. People will forget about this soon enough. Carlson's voice continued, like an incessant chant drilling into Tony's ears. Despite nodding absently in response, it was clear Tony's attention was anywhere but on the script. Once Carlson had finished his monologue, he politely excused himself. Pepper quickly followed after him to express her gratitude. I just wanted to thank you, Pepper said, catching up to him in the hallway. You've really helped us a lot, thank you, and thank your team from the Homeland, Strategic Defense, and Attack. Pepper trailed off awkwardly, struggling to remember the agency's cumbersome name. Carlson maintained his usual polite smile, calm, professional, and somewhat detached. Or perhaps it was just routine. Just call us SHIELD. We've officially rebranded. Oh, that's much easier, Pepper said with a relieved nod. Back in the lounge, Lemieux put down the newspaper he'd been reading, a smirk playing on his lips. His gaze locked on Carlson, his tone half teasing, half serious. Agent Carlson, he began, his voice laced with amusement. If I remember correctly, I'm the one who came up with that name. Shouldn't I be getting some royalties for that? Anything less than $1 million, and I'm not signing off on it. His words referred to their first meeting during Stark's charity gala, where Lemieux had jokingly coined the name SHIELD. Now, he was dragging it back into the conversation with a playful jab. Carlson's ever-composed demeanor faltered for just a moment. His smile turned sheepish as he let out a soft, almost apologetic laugh. I thought you were joking back then. Oh, I was serious, Lemieux replied with a straight face, though the glimmer of humor in his eyes gave him away. Who wouldn't take free money if they could get it? Well. Carlson hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. I'll file a report with my superiors. That's not really my call to make. Good, Lemieux said, leaning back against the couch with a satisfied nod. Don't take too long now. Carlson could only shake his head with a resigned smile as he turned to leave. Pepper, having overheard the conversation, stifled a laugh, while Tony simply shrugged, accustomed to Lemieux's antics. It wasn't the first time Lemieux had joked about profiting from absurd situations, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. All right, I look forward to hearing back from you, Lemieux said, squinting slightly. He looked completely serious, even though he knew he was just making things up. Pepper and Carlson shook hands warmly at the door as she walked him out. A small, awkward cough broke the silence. Ahem. Tony Stark, still lounging on the couch, shifted uneasily. His gaze kept flickering toward the doorway where Pepper and Carlson were exchanging pleasantries. Now, Tony wasn't usually the jealous type. With the sheer number of women he'd dated over the years, he simply didn't have the time or energy to care about who was talking to whom. But this? Watching Pepper shake hands and chat casually with another man, especially one who had, in Tony's mind, sabotaged his romantic moment the previous night, felt different. Worse, the guy wasn't just some random agent. Carlson was polite, calm, and carried himself with a quiet sort of sophistication that Tony couldn't ignore. A faint pang of unease settled in his chest. So, Tony waved the small slip of paper Carlson had given him, feigning nonchalance but doing a poor job at hiding his annoyance. How do you two know each other? I mean, you and Agent Carlson. His words were casual, but his tone carried the unmistakable tang of jealousy. Pepper, however, wasn't buying it. She gave him a tired but amused smile, shaking her head as if she'd heard this line before. Tony, it's nothing to get worked up about, she said with a shrug, dismissing the question. Then, she quickly changed the subject. Now, come on. It's time for you to head out. The reporters are all waiting. Without waiting for his reply, she grabbed his suit jacket and helped him put it on, brushing the fabric smooth with practiced precision. Tony stood still, letting Pepper fuss over him as she adjusted his jacket. It gave him a moment to collect himself. He could feel that hint of irrational jealousy lingering, but he wasn't about to let it show. So, in true Tony Stark fashion, he tried to steer the conversation somewhere completely different. You know, he said, glancing at her casually. I like the name Iron Man. I think it suits me. Pepper, still adjusting his collar, didn't even glance up. It doesn't. He's just your bodyguard, she corrected without missing a beat. Tony grumbled under his breath, all right, you win. Then, almost as if talking to himself, he added, still, I think I am Iron Man. No one else could have done what I did. Pepper froze for a split second before continuing her work. Tony didn't stop. His voice grew softer, more reflective as he spoke, almost like he was justifying it to himself. I mean, think about it. I single-handedly took down a terrorist operation, stopped Obadiah from selling weapons that could have destroyed countless lives. His gaze drifted off, as though he were staring at something far away. I think I've earned the right to call myself Iron Man. Then, almost out of nowhere, he added, and I think I should have a girlfriend. The room went silent. Even Tony seemed startled by his own words. For a moment, he stood there, wondering how he'd let that slip. But now that it was out there was no going back. He straightened up and leaned into it, keeping his tone steady, as though this had been his plan all along. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 9 comment. Vote. Chapter 18. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light, insert jiggle gif /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. For a moment, he stood there, wondering how he'd let that slip. But now that it was out there was no going back. He straightened up and leaned into it, keeping his tone steady, as though this had been his plan all along. She'd know who I really am, Tony continued, his voice calm but deliberate. She'd worry about me all the time, but she'd also be proud of me. She'd feel conflicted, sure, but deep down, she'd be drawn to me, and she'd always be there, quietly supporting me in the background. Pepper, standing just inches away, said nothing. Her hand stilled on his collar as her gaze flickered up to meet his. And I'm proud of her, too, Tony Stark continued softly, his eyes steady on Pepper. She's brave and fearless, even if she's a little clumsy sometimes. Tony turned to face Pepper fully, his voice dropping into a tone that was both gentle and utterly captivating. Are you really going to tell me you haven't thought about it? That night, and last night? Pepper's gaze met his, flickering with hesitation. There was a softness in her eyes, an undercurrent of emotions she didn't try to hide. She started, her voice almost a whisper. Then, she looked away, her head dipping slightly as if weighed down by her thoughts. I need to think about it. She took a deep breath before continuing, her words tinged with a hint of sadness. If I quit my job. Tony frowned, confusion and concern etching onto his face. Pepper kept her head low, avoiding his eyes. Deep down, the fact that Tony was her boss still bothered her. It wasn't just about the professional line she'd always drawn, it was about principles. A subordinate doesn't kiss her boss. And then there was the weight of public scrutiny, the whispers and stares that would inevitably follow. The air between them grew heavy, as if the tension in the room had frozen time. And then, suddenly, a document appeared in front of Pepper, breaking the moment like a sharp knock at the door. Pepper, I've got something for you, came a calm, familiar voice. Pepper and Tony both jumped slightly, startled out of their private bubble. They turned simultaneously to find Lemieux standing there, his face wearing a warm, knowing smile. Neither of them had noticed him approach, though Lemieux figured they were too wrapped up in each other to pay attention to anything else. It's a gift, Lemieux continued, his tone casual but laced with purpose. He handed the document to Pepper, gesturing for her to take it. Pepper blinked, her confusion evident. She unfolded the document and scanned it briefly before her eyes widened in shock. 1% of Stark Industries stock, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Lemieux nodded, the smile never leaving his face. That's right. If you ever get tired of being a personal assistant, why not join the board of directors instead? Stark Industries is ours to run now. We could easily move you into an equal position. Pepper stood frozen, staring at the document. 1% didn't sound like much on the surface, but in a company like Stark Industries, it was worth at least $1 billion, even with the current drop in stock value. And once Tony revealed his identity as Iron Man and the revolutionary miniaturized arc reactor technology, its value would skyrocket. This wasn't just a gift, it was a fortune. Pepper finally looked up, disbelief written all over her face. Where did this come from? She asked, her voice cautious and full of suspicion. Is this from Tony? Did he approve this? I didn't think he was capable of being this generous. I've always been generous. Don't I have a reputation for that? Though, admittedly, this wasn't from me. Tony Stark waved his hands defensively, trying to make his case. But Pepper didn't seem to hear him. Her focus remained fixed on Lemieux, waiting for his explanation. Feigning surprise, Lemieux raised an eyebrow and said, You forgot? You even compiled the reports when I was acquiring Stark Industries stock. You submitted those to Tony yourself, remember? Pepper blinked, her mind reeling. This had to be a joke, one too surreal to believe. Haha. To Tony. She stammered, turning to Stark for confirmation, her voice rising in disbelief. To her shock, Stark shrugged and nodded casually. It's true. Her head snapped back toward Lemieux, her words spilling out in a mix of confusion and denial. But, how is this possible? This can't be real. No one can pull that off, and you're so young. Based on the data Pepper had handled, this meant Lemieux had somehow made over $100 billion in less than 6 months. It was absurd, practically unimaginable. What Pepper didn't know, however, was that Lemieux's total net worth had already soared past $300 billion by now. Lemieux gently patted her arm, his smile calm and reassuring. There's no need to be so shocked. For me, this is perfectly normal. You've probably noticed by now that I'm not exactly ordinary. Pepper took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. She wasn't going to touch the topic of Lemieux's peculiarities, not now. Instead, she shook her head firmly, her tone resolute. I can't accept this. It's far too much. Lemieux's lips curved into a sly smile, mischief dancing in his eyes. Well, I've already transferred the shares. Even if you refuse, there's nothing you can do about it. He leaned back slightly, exuding confidence. I finalized everything online. All the legal procedures are complete through some technical means, of course. These documents? They're purely symbolic. Tear them up if you want, it won't change anything. Lemieux straightened his posture, his expression softening into one of sincerity. Pepper, this is my way of saying thank you. You've done so much for me over these past 6 months. He paused, his gaze steady but warm. You probably don't even remember, but on my first day here in America, you bought me clothes out of your own pocket. You've been there, looking out for me, even when you didn't have to. Pepper stood silent for a moment, her emotions a whirlwind. It was hard to process what she was hearing or the magnitude of what Lemieux had done. Tony, meanwhile, was leaning back in his chair, his arms crossed as he observed the scene with mild amusement. Well, Pepper, he drawled, looks like you've got a little philanthropist here. Pepper shot him a sharp look, but it lacked her usual sharpness. Deep down, she felt the weight of gratitude for the gesture, overwhelming as it was. She didn't have the heart to argue further. Lemieux simply smiled, as though her acceptance or rejection was never in doubt. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators' thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Creation is hard, cheer me up. Vote for me. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 19. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light, insert jiggle gifs / pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. I want to thank you, Pepper. Pepper fell silent for a moment, her eyes gradually turning red. Then, without warning, she pulled Lemieux into a tight embrace, her voice catching in her throat. You really remembered all this time. There. Lemieux gently patted her back, his voice soothing like an adult comforting a child. No crying now. If you keep hugging me like this, a certain Mr. Stark over there is going to get jealous. He nearly lost it when you just shook hands with someone else. He wriggled out of her embrace and took her hand, looking at her with a mischievous smile. I've always thought you two were a perfect match. Why don't you just say yes already? Then, he turned to Stark, his gaze playful yet serious. You'll take good care of her, won't you? Of course. Tony Stark shrugged, pretending to be indifferent. But inside, he was smirking. Sure, Lemieux was teasing him about being jealous, but in the end, the kid was nudging things exactly where he wanted them to go. Good, that settles it. Lemieux placed their hands together, a satisfied look crossing his face. As someone who valued his friends deeply, he was genuinely happy to see them together. Pepper instinctively tightened her grip around Stark's hand but remained hesitant. She still wasn't willing to accept Lemieux's gift. Lemieux, I really appreciate this. But you should take your shares back, I just can't accept them. Lemieux's smile remained unchanged, his expression calm yet resolute. There was no room for negotiation. There's no need to argue. You don't get a say in this. If you insist, I have all the time in the world to sit here and listen to you go on about it all day. His tone was light, but his words carried undeniable finality. I'm never taking them back. If you truly don't want them, just find a random stranger on the street and hand them over. To you, this may seem like an immense fortune. But to me, it's nothing. His gaze softened, carrying a depth of sincerity. Where I come from, we have a saying, a drop of kindness should be repaid with a spring of gratitude. And more importantly, I know you have the ability to handle this wealth. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have given it to you in the first place. Most of the time, wealth beyond one's control only leads to disaster. Then, as if shifting gears completely, Lemieux casually dropped another piece of news. By the way, I've decided to build myself a house and move out. It should be done in a few months. I'm moving out. A hush fell over the room. Lemieux repeated himself, just in case they hadn't heard him the first time. Tony and Pepper exchanged looks, both speaking at the same time but with completely different reactions. Pepper's response was immediate and anxious. No. You can't. It's not safe for you to live alone. Tony, on the other hand, practically lit up with joy. He let out an excited whoop, his face breaking into a grin as if he'd just won the lottery. Wow. That's amazing. When are you leaving? I'll throw you a farewell party. After half a year of living together and fighting side by side, Tony had come to trust the alien kid completely. In fact, he was more than ready for him to move out so he could finally enjoy some uninterrupted one-on-one time with Pepper. Besides, their agreement had always been clear: Lemieux was free to leave once he received his own Iron Man suit. While the design wasn't exactly Stark's, Lemieux had successfully built his own Spectre armor, and the timing more or less lined up. Pepper shot Tony a glare, her expression filled with reproach. How can you be okay with letting a minor live alone? It's too dangerous. That's completely irresponsible. Tony blinked at her in disbelief, as if she had just said the sky was green. Pepper, the miner you're talking about just gifted you, what, at least $10 billion in stock? And oh yeah, he sent Obadiah straight to hell. If anything, other people should be worried about their safety, not him. I still don't think it's right. No matter what. Lemieux sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Why does this have to be so difficult? All right, enough arguing, he cut in before the debate could spiral further. I'm not going far. I'm building my house in Malibu just one hill over. You guys can drop by whenever you want. It's a 20-minute drive, at most. If you take the armor, it's only a few seconds. He had carefully chosen that location. He loved the scenery, and frankly, there weren't many better spots nearby for a private villa. Press conference. At the podium, Rhodey gave a brief rundown of the situation before introducing Tony. Mr. Stark has prepared a statement. He will not be answering any questions. Thank you for your cooperation. The murmurs of the assembled journalists filled the air, a low, chaotic hum. At the back of the hall, an entire row of cameras stood ready, their flashes going off in rapid succession, capturing every moment of what was about to unfold. In the front row sat a striking woman in professional attire, Christine. A journalist for Vanity Fair and an old acquaintance of Tony Stark. Very old. Rhodey stepped aside, making room for Tony at the center. Stark strode onto the stage with effortless charm. Even the simple motion of pulling a slip of paper from his pocket looked stylish. He waved a hand casually, clearing his throat twice before speaking. Been a while since I did this kind of thing. Guess I'll just have to read straight from the script. A ripple of laughter and murmured amusement spread through the audience. Tony glanced down at the paper and began reading in a deliberately neutral tone. There have been some concerns regarding my possible involvement with... Excuse me, Mr. Stark. A sharp, eager voice cut him off before he could continue. Christine leaned forward, her lips curved in a knowing smile. Do you really expect us to believe that the guy in the suit is just your bodyguard? Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 10 comment. Vote. Chapter 20. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert I am. Atomic. GIF/pics here, most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy, break this guy win streak guys, alien monster. Christine leaned forward, her lips curved in a knowing smile. Do you really expect us to believe that the guy in the suit is just your bodyguard? Tony's brows lifted slightly as he looked at her, caught somewhere between amused and exasperated. Questioning the official story is one thing, he said smoothly, but implying that I'm some kind of superhero and holding me accountable for that assumption? That's another thing entirely. Christine's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I never said you were a superhero, Mr. Stark. You didn't. Tony tilted his head. Great. Because that would be ridiculous. A pause. A beat of silence. Then, a flicker of awkwardness crossed his face. Wait, was I just flattering myself? He sighed, shifting uncomfortably. Look, I'm clearly not cut out for the hero gig. I have a lot of flaws. I've made a ton of bad decisions, publicly, I might add. Rhodey leaned in, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. Stick to the script. Right, right. Tony let out another sigh. Screw it. No one really cared what was on the script anyway. You know what? He lowered the paper, straightened his posture, and let the words slip out naturally. Truth is. He glanced around the silent room, eyes scanning the crowd. I am Iron Man. Silence. For 3, maybe 4, unbearably long seconds, the room remained eerily quiet. Then, like a tidal wave crashing onto the shore, the cheers erupted. Deafening. Roaring. The press conference had just exploded into chaos. The entire room erupted. Reporters sprang to their feet, cheering, shouting questions, screaming, and hammering the shutters of their cameras like machine gun fire. Colonel Rhodey stood off to the side, watching the chaos unfold. He cursed internally but kept a professional smile plastered on his face. Did he just say good? Whatever. He should have expected this by now. On stage, Tony Stark simply stood there, momentarily stunned. Then, ever so slowly, the corners of his mouth curled upward into a smirk. So I wasn't just flattering myself, hey? No. Definitely not. But amidst the standing ovation, the roaring applause, and the ecstatic frenzy, one person remained seated. Christine. Her jaw was clenched so tightly it was a wonder her teeth hadn't shattered. Her expression was a mix of pale fury and deep frustration, her lips painted a striking red that only served to emphasize the sickly green tint on her face. She never saw this coming. She had planned to corner him, to provoke him, to put him in a tight spot. Instead, she had just handed him a golden opportunity on a silver platter. She watched, seething, as the crowd practically worshipped that smug playboy, her nails digging into the fabric of her skirt. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't accept it. And yet, she also knew, with absolute certainty, that there was nothing she could do about it. Nothing at all. Her frustration boiled inside her, like 1,000 screaming prairie dogs clawing to escape. Backstage. In a private room behind the chaos, a young man leaned against a sleek, modern desk, watching the live broadcast on a massive screen. When he heard that line "I'm Iron Man," he couldn't help but smile. A slow, satisfied curve of his lips. His long fingers drummed out a playful rhythm against the table, his mood as light as a feather. That's it. Money in the bank. In the next few days, Stark Industries stock would soar. It would climb relentlessly, higher and higher, until it reached the metaphorical heights of Mount Everest. Only when the public's frenzy cooled would it slowly settle down. Great sage, pull back 10 billion in cash. It's time for us to build a proper home. Acknowledged. Building a mansion like Stark's? A few dozen million would more than suffice. But that wasn't his plan. He was going to buy the entire mountain. And the surrounding forest. A vast, private sanctuary where he could plant trees, grow bamboo, and keep pets, an estate tailored to his tastes. Based on current land prices, the whole project would cost somewhere between 2 to 4 million. Well worth it. A large investment would also be needed for research equipment and manufacturing tools. Lemieux had no intention of running to Stark every time he wanted to tinker with his armor. If he wanted true independence, he had to set up his own lab. The estimated cost for this alone would likely surpass the price of the entire mountain estate. Sitting beside him, Pepper let out a quiet sigh as she cracked open a macadamia nut with a snap and handed it to him. Her face was a mix of exhaustion and amusement, though not a trace of surprise. She had already expected this outcome. After spending years by Tony's side, no one knew him better than she did. He was always pulling unexpected stunts, especially if they put him in the spotlight. And on top of that, he was unbearably arrogant. If someone dismissed him, ignored him, or doubted him, he would go out of his way to prove them wrong. You better not start acting like him, Pepper warned, shaking her head. The only thing he's good at is causing trouble. Besides that, he has 0 redeeming qualities. She tried to sound stern, but her tone lacked real conviction. Lemieux raised an eyebrow, lips curling into a teasing smirk. His voice was slow and deliberate. Then, tell me, Miss Beautiful and Generous Pepper Potts, why do you like him? Before she could come up with an answer, the door creaked open. Tony Stark and Colonel Rhodes entered the room, fresh from the press conference. They were walking close together, with Rhodey gesturing wildly as he spoke. His voice was filled with excitement, and even though he wasn't speaking loudly, a few words drifted over to Lemieux's ears. You have multiple suits like that, don't you? Come in, let me try one out. You know how awesome they are, everyone does. They're calling you Iron Man. No one can see those armors and not want to wear one. Of course they're awesome. You think I don't know that? Tony interrupted, nodding in agreement. But before Rhodey could celebrate, Tony threw a verbal curveball that crushed his hopes in an instant. But nope. Custom made. Not for loan. Rhodey's face dropped. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 9 comment. Vote. Chapter 21. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert malevolent backshots gifs /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. Hey guys. Have you watched the From series yet? Somewhere in the suburbs. A wooden American-style house stood quietly in the countryside. Inside, the living room was slightly messy, scattered papers on the coffee table, an open bottle of whiskey half empty. A television was on, filling the room with the crackling energy of a live news broadcast. The male anchor's voice was hoarse with excitement, carrying the kind of urgency that demanded attention. Rejoice, America. After Steve Rogers, we have our next superhero. That man is none other than Tony Stark, our very own Iron Man. The owner of the house sat on the couch, legs crossed, one hand flipping through a newspaper while the other rested near his drink. On the front page, an entire section was dedicated to a bold, eye-catching spread. Half of the image displayed a sleek red and gold iron mask, shining under the studio lights. The other half showed the unmistakable face of Tony Stark, his expression sharp and confident. At the bottom, printed in massive, black artistic letters. I'm Iron Man. On the back of the newspaper, a bold headline read, Stark Industries stock hits consecutive daily limits. Sunlight streamed through the open door, casting a gentle warmth into the room. From the yard outside, the distant sound of children's laughter echoed through the air. It was late autumn, yet this year, the chill wasn't as biting as usual. In the yard, 3 or 4 young children, dressed in thin shirts and pants, huddled together. At the center of their circle was a small figure made of packed dirt, a crude humanoid shape with 4 legs and 2 heads. They jumped around excitedly, shouting at the top of their lungs. Iron Man! Iron Man! A postman, dressed in a black jacket, stepped through the gate and into the yard. In one hand, he held a thin envelope, and in a gruff, booming voice, he called out. Ezekiel Stain. You've got mail. His rough voice instantly drowned out the children's cheers. Startled by the unfamiliar and imposing presence, the kids scattered like frightened birds, disappearing into the neighborhood. Moscow. Snow was falling heavily, covering the streets in a thick white blanket. Pedestrians trudged through the icy pathways, each step a struggle against the winter's grip. Off the main road, hidden behind piles of garbage and debris, was a narrow alley rarely visited by anyone. At the very end of this alley stood an old, run-down building. Inside, the room was in complete disarray. At the center of the dimly lit space was a simple, rickety bed. Lying on it was an elderly man, his body frail and withered, the scent of decay clinging to him like a heavy shroud. Beside the bed sat a middle-aged man, his long, unkempt hair hanging loosely around his worn and weary face. He was wrapped in a tattered coat, barely providing any warmth against the cold that seeped through the cracked walls. An ancient television, dating back to the previous century, sat near the bedside. Its flickering screen endlessly replayed the same monotonous news coverage praising and glorifying Iron Man. The old man's dull, lifeless eyes turned toward his son. His breath was weak, his voice laced with bitterness and regret. That should have been you. His name was Anton Vanko, once a brilliant scientist who had co-developed the arc reactor alongside Howard Stark. But his fate had been cruel. Accused of misusing the technology for personal gain, he was exiled from Stark Industries. Branded a criminal, he was deported back to Russia on charges of espionage and later sentenced to rot in Siberian exile. And now, decades later, while the son of his former partner basked in fame and fortune, he and his own son were left to decay in the filth of a forgotten alley, living among rats and insects. Sitting beside the bed, Ivan Vanko gently placed a hand on his father's withered arm. His voice was calm but filled with quiet sorrow. Don't listen to their nonsense. But the TV continued broadcasting Stark's name, Stark's legacy, every word slicing into Ivan's mind like a blade, filling him with a chaotic storm of emotions. I'm sorry. The only thing I can leave you is knowledge. The old man's voice was barely a whisper, his breath weak and fleeting. He struggled to say more, but in the very next moment, his body stilled. Life slipped away from him like a dying ember. A single tear slid down Ivan Vanko's face. His hands trembled as he reached out, gently caressing the lifeless, weathered cheek of his father. Then, in a voice filled with agony, he let out a heartbreaking scream. Ah! Ah! His cry echoed through the cold, dimly lit room, but no one was there to hear it. By the time Tony Stark returned to his mansion, the sun had already begun to dip below the horizon. There had been a lot to handle that day, coordinating repairs for the damage to his home, dodging persistent reporters eager for an exclusive interview, and most importantly, assuming full control over Stark Industries in the wake of Obadiah Stane's death. As he stepped through the front door, he immediately noticed something was off. The house was unnervingly quiet, carrying an air of unnatural stillness like a jungle that had suddenly gone silent, warning of an unseen predator lurking nearby. Tony frowned. J.A.R.V.I.S. Welcome home, sir. J.A.R.V.I.S.'s response came as usual, but the automated lights didn't turn on. The unease in Tony's gut deepened. Standing just outside the living room, his gaze landed on a dark silhouette near the sofa. The figure stood motionless, facing the floor-to-ceiling glass wall, staring out at the ocean as the last traces of daylight faded into the deep blue of night. There had been no warning from JARVIS. No alarm. No sign of forced entry. As if, the system didn't even recognize this person as an intruder. Then, in the vast emptiness of the room, a deep, weighted voice broke the silence. I am Iron Man? You really think? The figure scoffed, voice laced with amusement and something else, something unreadable. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Creation is hard, cheer me up. Vote for me. Comment. 10 comment. Vote. Chapter 22. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n. http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light insert Fury, 1i, gif/pics here, most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. I am Iron Man? You really think? The figure scoffed, voice laced with amusement and something else, something unreadable. Before he could finish, another voice cut in, smooth yet laced with quiet confidence. You really think you are the only superhero in the world? It was Limu, standing beside Tony, his expression unreadable as he continued the stranger's sentence for him. The shadowed figure finally turned around, though his features remained obscured by the dim lighting. He let out a short, derisive huff. A man with no past. No records. No history. 6 months ago, you appeared out of nowhere in Afghanistan. Before that? You didn't exist. His voice carried weight and undeniable authority. And in that moment, Tony Stark had a feeling that this night was about to become very, very interesting. A few days ago, you and Stark personally entered a war zone in Afghanistan. Yesterday, you killed Obadiah and caused a large-scale explosion. Don't try to provoke us. The only reason I haven't arrested you on the spot is because of my generosity. The voice was cold, dripping with condescension and arrogance, as if offering a favor from a position of absolute authority. And who the hell are you? Stark reached out, instinctively pulling Limu slightly behind him. Then, he stepped forward, placing himself directly between Limu and the intruder. His posture was tense, ready to call his mark armor into action at a moment's notice. The room crackled with the unspoken promise of an impending fight. The dark figure stepped forward, revealing himself bit by bit. First, the glint of a polished, bald head. Then, a long black leather trench coat. And finally, a face half covered by a sleek black eye patch, exuding an air of absolute authority. I am Nick Fury. Director of SHIELD. Limu raised an eyebrow, then let out an exaggerated "oh," as if just remembering something. His voice carried a hint of playful mischief. So, did Coulson tell you about me? He stroked his chin. Wait, are you here to pay the copyright fees? I hope you brought cash. Anything less than $1 million, and I'm not interested. Fury's brow furrowed. This is nonsense. SHIELD isn't paying you a single cent. Limu waved a hand dismissively. That's fine. I'd actually love to be S.H.I.E.L.D.'s creditor. Imagine telling people Nick Fury owes me $1 million. Sounds pretty cool, don't you think? Of course, money wasn't the point. Limu had just found it amusing to mess with Coulson earlier, and now he was running with it, seeing if he could throw Fury off his game. Fury, meanwhile, was not amused. He had carefully crafted his dramatic entrance, built up his intimidating aura, and now this was what they were discussing? His patience wore thin. Enough. I'm not here to joke around. With an exhale through his nose, his single eye shifted from Stark to Limu, studying him like a snake sizing up its prey. Stark, I originally came to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative. Stark blinked. The what now? Some kind of boys' club. Fury ignored the remark and continued as if Stark hadn't spoken. But instead, I find out your idea of heroism is letting a teenager pilot a war machine. His gaze snapped back to Limu, sharp as a knife. And you Limu H. of Rhea. Where exactly did you come from? Don't tell me you just crawled out of the center of the earth. The tension in the room tightened like a coiled spring. The three of them stood in a deadlock, none willing to break the silence. Then, Lemieux casually walked over to the couch, plopped down, and leaned back. No rush. Let's sit down first. Lemieux was the one to break the deadlock. He gestured toward Fury in an inviting manner before tugging at Tony Stark's sleeve. Relax, there's no danger. He's just a friendly, mild-mannered, and incredibly good-natured agent chief. Came all this way just to have a chat with us. The least we can do is offer him a drink. As he spoke, he casually settled himself onto the couch. The dimly lit living room fell into a momentary silence. The distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs outside filtered through the glass walls, adding a subtle undercurrent of tension. Nick Fury, for his part, seemed willing to play along. He wasn't here to pick a fight, at least, not directly. And even if he were, being alone in unfamiliar territory wasn't exactly in his favor. Lemieux poured himself a glass of water and took a slow sip. In the dark, his expression remained unreadable, his voice light but deliberate. Can I ask you a personal question? Without waiting for a response, he continued. Did something happen to your eye? Fury's lone eye studied him carefully, the silence between them stretching just long enough to be uncomfortable. Then, in a voice deep and laced with implication, he replied. Yes. I lost it during a mission, because I put too much trust in an immature teammate. Was that supposed to be a jab? Lemieux almost scoffed. No matter where Fury went, he never missed a chance to lecture someone. He did the same thing with Steve Rogers. Classic Fury. If the man went on to say something ridiculous like a single eye is a symbol of a man's resolve, then things would really take a turn for the bizarre. No, they'd take a turn for the disastrous. On the surface, Lemieux showed no reaction. His expression remained calm, as if he hadn't picked up on the subtext at all. MHM. But actually, I wasn't asking about your eye. He took another sip of water, then spoke with an air of casual interest. I was asking about a certain adorable cat. Word is, you own a big orange tabby. I like cats. Any chance I could meet it someday? Fury's brows twitched ever so slightly. His fingers, which had been resting on the armrest, flexed just a fraction. His tone took on a subtle edge. Where did you hear that? Why mention the cat? Could he possibly know that his eye was clawed out by a flurkin? No, that shouldn't be possible. The air grew tense. Meanwhile, Stark, completely left out of whatever psychological battle was unfolding, sighed dramatically before throwing in his own 2 cents. You never told me you liked cats. If you do, I could get you 100 of them. Every color, one of each. Maybe even a cheetah. I'm very generous, you know I never owe anyone money, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to give away a few pets. A long silence followed. Neither Lemieux nor Fury reacted. They were too busy analyzing each other, weighing each word and gesture for hidden meaning. For all his usual wit, Stark was very much not a part of this conversation. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 23. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Mrs. Marvel gifts/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. Lemieux took another sip of water. Performing small, mechanical actions while talking helped him keep his thoughts flowing smoothly. A friend told me. A friend who can fly. She was born on Earth, but she left a long time ago. Nick Fury adjusted his coat and crossed his legs, a casual gesture meant to mask the storm raging beneath his calm exterior. So, what you're telling me is, you're an alien. Of course. That's my backstory. Isn't that what you wanted to know? Fury spread his hands, as if accepting this absurd explanation. All right, fine. Alien. Too bad, though the cat's dead. No cat lives that long. I can't bring it to meet you. Old fox. Lemieux smiled and nodded. Now that's a shame. I was hoping it could live 1,000 years or so. That friend of mine mentioned you once. Said you were a decent guy. Just, a bit talkative. Lemieux delivered the line with an absolutely straight face. Not a hint of hesitation. Because, after all, slimes don't have hearts, so he had no conscience to weigh on. Nick Fury was not just talkative. In his younger days, he had been a full-fledged chatterbox. Even now, despite mellowing out with age, he still had a habit of dropping motherf into conversations like punctuation. After a moment of silence, Fury finally furrowed his brow and asked the question that had been pressing on his mind. Your friend. Is it Captain Marvel? Lemieux blinked innocently. Take a guess. Fury's already dark expression grew darker. Sensing that pushing his luck any further might result in some serious consequences, Lemieux decided to cut the act short. Carol Danvers. Tony Stark, who had been watching this whole exchange with an arched brow, turned his gaze from Lemieux to Fury and back again. Carol Danvers? Never heard of her. Wait. Wasn't Fury supposed to be here to talk to him? How had these two ended up deep in their own conversation instead? With an air of complete nonchalance, Stark reached under the table, pulled out a bottle of beer and a small bag of pine nuts, then leaned back into the couch. You two go on. I'll just sit here and enjoy the show. Nick Fury's expression eased slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It was the kind of smile one gives when they recognize a shared connection. As if, because of a mutual acquaintance, he now saw Lemieux as something closer to a friend. When did you two meet? Fury asked, his tone casual but probing. She mentioned she'd be coming back soon. Didn't she come with you? The old gang misses her. Lemieux rolled his eyes, hiding a sharp sneer in his heart. Every single word was a trap. He weighed his options before finally replying, first off, she doesn't come back unless it's absolutely necessary. Or, to put it another way, she hasn't returned since she left. Secondly, according to her, she hasn't contacted you in over a decade. Then, he added, as if to hammer in the final nail, and lastly, if I don't get to pet a cat soon, I might just drop dead. From now on, I refuse to answer any of your questions. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. We can have a discussion, but I won't be interrogated. That was enough information to keep Fury busy. Any more, and he risked exposing himself. From that point on, no matter how Fury tried to press him whether with direct questioning or subtle leading remarks, Lemieux either remained silent or deflected with vague, meaningless answers. His stance was clear, give me the cat, and I'll talk. No cat? Then you can dream on. Of course, there was no way Fury could deliver on that demand. He had no idea where the Flurkin had disappeared to. After a long, frustrating 10 minutes, Fury finally gave up. With an irritated sigh, he stood and made his way toward the exit. Tony Stark, still nursing his beer, watched the S.H.I.E.L.D. director leave. His gaze flickered to the swaying hem of Fury's signature leather trench coat, moving side to side with each step. He frowned. Doesn't he get hot in that thing? Stark muttered to himself. Now that the infamous spymaster was gone, Lemieux exhaled, stretching out his arms in exaggerated relief. Good question. I've wondered about that too. But what I do know is that you should upgrade Jarvis. The fact that just anyone can stroll in here is pretty embarrassing for a so-called genius billionaire superhero. To everyone's surprise, Jarvis, who had been unusually quiet throughout the whole encounter, suddenly chimed in, Sir, I must admit, I share the same concern. Stark considered that for a moment, fingers absent-mindedly drumming against the couch's armrest in a rhythm reminiscent of typing. Yeah, you got a point. Got any suggestions? Help me look into it later. Obadiah had only managed to infiltrate the house because he had access privileges. But for Fury to waltz in unnoticed? That meant someone had actively cracked Jarvis's defenses, possibly even implanted backdoors or hidden exploits. That wasn't just concerning. It was a direct challenge. Meanwhile, Lemieux simply stood up and headed for the stairs, making it clear he was done for the night. Just as he reached the first step, he suddenly paused, as if belatedly realizing that someone had asked him a question. Then, without looking back, he gave an indifferent shrug and continued up the stairs, leaving Stark alone with his thoughts. Lemieux turned his head halfway, letting out a lazy yawn. He waved his hand dismissively, his voice muffled and drowsy. Yet. I'm moving out soon. No way I'm wasting my time writing code for you. He paused briefly before adding in an even softer tone, good night. Dream on. On a normal day, he wouldn't lift a finger for Stark, let alone now when he was this exhausted. The mental duel he'd just had with the world's top spymaster had drained him far more than expected. He'd have to eat an extra 2 eggs in the morning just to recover. In hindsight, he should have let the great sage handle it. Going in himself had been a bit of a stretch. That one-eyed bald guy had a gaze sharp as a blade, constantly analyzing, constantly prying into people's thoughts, as if he could see right through someone at any given moment. Keeping up the act had been exhausting. If he had to rate his own performance, he'd say it was acceptable. Not great, not bad, just barely satisfactory. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 7 comment. Vote. Chapter 24. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Deadpool gif/pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. If he had to rate his own performance, he'd say it was acceptable. Not great, not bad, just barely satisfactory. In the end, he'd resorted to a shameless strategy, but at least he hadn't given Fury any openings to exploit. He'd delivered the message he wanted to send. Nick Fury wouldn't believe everything, of course. But as long as he remained half convinced, that was enough to maintain a fragile peace. After all, information like this was nearly impossible to verify. That meant Fury would have to remain in a perpetual state of uncertainty. A couple more years down the line, who would even care about SHIELD? Limu knew that after tonight, their surveillance on him would tighten. But that didn't bother him. On this planet, no one could escape the Great Sage's watchful eye. Outside Stark's villa, a sleek, black, bulletproof limousine glided silently toward the entrance. As soon as Nick Fury stepped inside, the car pulled away, disappearing into the night as smoothly as it had arrived. Behind the wheel sat a strikingly beautiful woman, Maria Hill. Dressed in a sleek black tactical suit, with matching gloves, she radiated a sharp, commanding presence softened only by a hint of elegance. Maria Hill wasn't just any SHIELD agent. She was Fury's most trusted second-in-command. She turned slightly, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. Her tone was calm, yet curious. How did it go? Fury shook his head. As expected. Stark didn't agree, but it was interesting. He had casually mentioned the idea of Stark joining the Avengers, and Stark hadn't even bothered to acknowledge it. Hill frowned slightly. Interesting. Fury simply chuckled, not offering any explanation. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the window, watching the city lights flicker past. Streetlights flashed by one after another, casting a glow over the road and its surroundings. But beyond the reach of their illumination, the distant trees loomed as dark, shadowy silhouettes. Failing to convince Stark to join the Avengers initiative was well within Nick Fury's expectations. He had never anticipated getting Tony Stark to agree on their first meeting. Tonight's visit was more about establishing a connection, making sure Stark remembered his face. As for Limu Echevarria, Fury had already harbored suspicions about his identity. The idea that he might be an alien had crossed his mind before. But what he hadn't expected, what had completely thrown him off, was how much Limu seemed to know about things long buried in the past. He had detailed knowledge about Carol Danvers. He seemed strangely familiar with Fury himself. If what he said was true, then there was no issue. But the problem was, Fury didn't quite believe him. His instincts told him that the kid was playing him for a fool. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find a single flaw in the logic. This was the first time in his long career as a spy that he had ever encountered something like this. As for the possibility that Carol had been captured, tortured, and forced to reveal classified information, Fury dismissed the thought almost immediately with a scoff. This was Captain Marvel they were talking about. A woman who could take on an entire fleet with nothing but her bare hands. Who in the universe was strong enough to break her? But there was something else, something that Fury did know. Back in the 1990s, there had been a case an individual who looked exactly like Limu had suddenly appeared, and then just as suddenly vanished. At the time, Fury had been just another agent, a nobody in SHIELD. He hadn't been aware of the incident. It was only years later, after he became director, that he gained access to those classified files. The case was unusual. The security clearance required to access it was extraordinarily high. The file was so sensitive that even now, years later, it still stood out vividly in Fury's memory. So much so that the moment he saw Limu's photo a few days ago, he had remembered it instantly. That file. Like a sudden bolt of lightning, a realization struck him. His expression hardened. His posture straightened. He had just connected the dots. Two classified files overlapped in Fury's mind. The first file documented an individual who bore an uncanny resemblance to Limu. It had been compiled by none other than Howard Stark, one of S.H.I.E.L.D's founding members. And its contents were, alarmingly sparse. The original file had contained more than a dozen pages, but most had been deliberately torn away, leaving only 4. Even those remaining pages had sections of text aggressively blacked out. What little remained was fragmented, offering only the barest hints of information. Name, Sophie. Gender, female. Age, unknown. Personality, cold, indifferent toward humans. Physical traits, unusual body density, possessing immense supernatural abilities, or rather, magical abilities. Arrival, descended in a pillar of light from the sky, classified as an extraterrestrial. First appeared in New York, was acquainted with Howard Stark. An individual who was close to a SHIELD founder. Coupled with the fact that Limu Echevarria was now associating closely with Tony Stark, this was the real reason why Fury had chosen not to antagonize Limu, at least, not yet. The second file had a lower clearance level. Fury had only come across it by chance. It read more like an archaeological report than a classified intelligence document. According to its contents, thousands of years ago, massive pillars of light would frequently descend upon the Nordic regions, leaving scorched earth and flames in their wake. The locals referred to these events as divine descents. The beings who arrived through these light pillars called themselves the Aesir. And just yesterday, Limu Echevarria had conjured a nearly identical pillar of light. A massive light column, irregular time intervals, strikingly similar appearances, the ability to appear and disappear at will. That meant they had to come from the same place. From a race known as the Aesir. And the so-called Aesir must have belonged to an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, one where magic and technology flourished together. This civilization had been observing Earth for an extremely long time. Perhaps they were simply watching, Or perhaps they had an agenda. Magic, divination. If magic included the ability to predict the future, then everything made perfect sense. I see it now. I know your secret. I win. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Fury's face. Crossing his arms, he leaned back against his seat and closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of rest. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Comment. 11 comment. Vote. Chapter 25. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Wolverine gifs / pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. 2 months had passed since Stark publicly declared himself as Iron Man. A little over a month ago, Musk Stevenson received a major contract to construct a brand new villa atop a cliff overlooking the Malibu coastline. The client was demanding, extremely generous with payment, and, from what people whispered, had an incredibly strong background. Not only had they purchased the entire hilltop, but they had also acquired a vast stretch of surrounding land. Every bureaucratic process had been smoothed over as if no one dared to interfere. In California's construction industry, Blackheart Architecture was a well-known name. While not the largest firm, it had built its reputation on speed, quality, and exorbitant fees. But what truly baffled competitors was the peculiar habit of the company's owner. He personally oversaw every project, on site. That owner was none other than Musk Stevenson. Lately, the world had been set ablaze with Iron Man news. The stock market was soaring, and investors were going wild. Some people were selling everything they owned, leveraging themselves into debts they could never repay, betting their entire futures on Stark Industries, the rising juggernaut of the century. Others, however, were convinced that Stark's current success was nothing more than a fleeting bubble, fireworks burning bright before inevitable collapse. They spent their days obsessively analyzing the perfect moment to short Stark Industries, hoping to strike when the illusion crumbled. Stevenson? He couldn't care less about any of it. Booms and busts were beyond his control. He only cared about running his company. His life's ambition was simple: make enough money, more than enough to live a life of absolute extravagance and freedom. He wanted to buy an entire private island and spend the rest of his sinful existence indulging in whatever he pleased. And Blackheart Architecture was the golden road leading straight to that dream. He had poured his sweat, blood, and soul into this company, building it into what it was today. Now, the project was nearly halfway complete, and the construction site was a hive of frenzied activity. Heavy machinery rumbled in the background, the air thick with the scent of dust and concrete. Workers bustled under the scorching sun, drenched in sweat, their bodies aching but their hands never stopping. And there, moving among them, was Musk Stevenson, a figure that stood out like a sore thumb. Or rather, a figure that didn't belong at all. He was dressed in a full suit and tie, a sleek custom-made black hard hat perched atop his head. In one hand, he held a thick stack of fresh, green dollar bills, waving it like a battle standard. His voice boomed across the site, impossibly loud, as if he had a built-in megaphone. All right. Keep it moving. Faster, you lazy bastards. This is happy work hour, get your asses in gear. Work like your life depends on it. Weekly bonuses. Monthly bonuses. Year-end bonuses. Do you still want them or not? Stevenson's sharp eyes darted around, scanning the entire site like a predator hunting prey. He refused to let a single lazy worker slip past his watch. Then he spotted him. A worker in a yellow hard hat standing still for over 10 seconds. Stevenson's expression darkened as he stalked forward silently. Smack. A fistful of cash landed directly on Yellow Hat's head. Hey. What the hell are you slacking off for? I saw you. Smack. Another hit. Smack. And another. Yellow Hat shrank back, clutching his helmet as if it could feel pain. He looked deeply wronged. Boss, it's not that I don't want to work. The machine broke. The steel cutter jammed, it won't move. Stevenson snapped his fingers, his mouth twisting into a feral snarl, eyes bulging with rage. He looked like he was about to devour someone on the spot. The machine broke? That's your excuse. You break down too, just like the machine. Why didn't you report it? And after reporting it, why aren't you doing something else? See those bricks over there? Pick them up. Use your hands. Use your shoulders. Hell, use your damn head if you have to. Move. Right. Now. Move your asses, damn it. Faster. With a loud slap on the worker's chest, Stevenson casually stuffed a crisp bill into his shirt pocket. Then, he roared. Did I make myself clear? Yellow Hat immediately snapped to attention, standing straight like a soldier. Yes, boss, he bellowed. Good. Now get back to work. Stevenson waved him off, pulling out his radio in one swift motion. Maintenance. Maintenance. Where the hell are you? Get over here. Now. Yes, boss, I'll be right. Click. Stevenson hung up mid-sentence and continued his all-seeing patrol, pointing at random workers as he barked orders. You. And you. Don't think I'm not watching. Get moving. Did you skip breakfast or something? Then, he raised both arms and shouted. Come on. Answer me. Do you want extra dinner tonight? Yes. The workers' voices boomed in unison, shaking the dust in the air. Satisfied, Stevenson finally started to feel a little winded from all the yelling. He climbed onto a nearby concrete pillar, plopped himself down, and cracked open a bottle of ice-cold water. Taking a deep, refreshing gulp, he let out a long sigh and surveyed the busy construction site below. His gaze was filled with pure emotion. You guys, are my wings. Time passed quickly, as fleeting as a white horse galloping across a field. Soon, winter had arrived, and the school was in the midst of exam week. At Stark's villa, in the living room, a breakfast set neatly on the table, a cup of oat milk, 2 crispy fried dough sticks, and a soft-boiled egg. In a foreign land, it was important to take care of oneself. While savoring the flavors of another country, one should also remember the tastes of home. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 11 comment. Vote. Chapter 26. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Police cars revolving light. Insert Wolverine gifs /pics here. Most likes comment will win police cars revolving light. Trophy. Yesterday's gifts winner, Kajino_Sora. Trophy. In a foreign land, it was important to take care of oneself. While savoring the flavors of another country, one should also remember the tastes of home. Lemieux, happily munching on half a dough stick, took a big gulp of oat milk. The white milk foam lingered on the corner of his lips, his hair gently fluttering in the warm morning breeze. The sight looked like a beautiful, lively scene from a cozy breakfast illustration. Pepper sat opposite him, elegantly brushing her golden hair behind her ear. She took small, measured bites of her breakfast, a tiny sandwich and half a glass of milk. Her portion was so small it seemed like she was feeding a kitten. Since confirming their relationship, Pepper had moved into the villa at Tony Stark's request. America, being a rather open country, meant that certain things were understood without having to be explicitly mentioned. Every night, the sounds of passion could be heard echoing through the walls. Unfortunately for one particular slime, his hearing was far too sharp, and there were nights when he couldn't fall asleep. It was another reason he had to move out. Pepper took a delicate bite of her sandwich, chewed slowly, and after swallowing, she finally spoke, her voice soft yet curious. I've noticed that construction on the mountain top across the way has been going on for quite a while now. It's progressing quickly. Is that the villa you're building? Lemieux continued eating without missing a beat, responding as he chewed. Yeah, I contacted a well-known construction company in California. I heard their boss studied in Japan and mastered some sort of theory scallions, or was it called spinach? Pepper blinked, slightly confused, as Lemieux explained, but decided to continue listening. They're incredibly efficient. They can build a whole villa in just a few months, from the ground up, inspections, to moving in. The fastest record is just 3 months. Lemieux took another bite of the dough stick, showing no sign of slowing down, while adding, of course, their prices are pretty steep. But it's nothing too outrageous. It's only about 10 million or so, but that's not something worth mentioning. After finishing his meal, Lemieux wiped his mouth clean and looked up at Pepper, his expression casual. When it's done, I'll move in there myself. Pepper still seemed a little concerned. She set down the sandwich in her hands and placed both of her hands on the table, looking across at him. Are you sure you'll be okay living on your own? Should I hire a caretaker for you? It's fine. I can take care of myself. Pepper hesitated but eventually nodded. I'll ask Tony to keep your room reserved. If you can't get used to it, you can always come back. But what if it's to eavesdrop on us? However, Lemieux didn't directly reject Pepper's kind offer. He just smiled and agreed, all right, I should be heading out now. Happy's waiting for me outside. Take your time eating. Lemieux finished the last half of his milk, licked the corner of his mouth with his tongue, stood up, and waved. Drive safe on your way. Got it. Lemieux was heading to school. Of course, he didn't have to worry about exams, but he had promised his mentor, old Emick, that he would visit him when he had the time. After the holiday, old Emick's family would come to pick him up for a family gathering, so these last few days were his only chance. After this, he would have to wait until school resumed. Outside the villa, a discreetly luxurious black car was parked. Happy was leaning against the car, wearing sunglasses and a suit. At first glance, he looked like a thug from the old movie The Godfather, one of those gangsters who might pull out a Beretta M1934 handgun from his pocket or take a Chicago typewriter out of the car. He seemed just as solid as when they first met. Invisible data flowed in Lemieux's eyes actually. Happy had gained 1.879 kilograms since then, and his belt was pulled tight. At this rate, he'd end up looking like the chubby guy Lemieux remembered. Have you been slacking off with your workouts lately? Happy took off his sunglasses and laughed, immediately transforming into a goofy figure, completely ruining his tough guy image. He instinctively patted his protruding belly, adding to the silliness. Ha ha ha, no, not at all. As a professional bodyguard, I maintain a high-intensity training schedule every day, you know how it is. Get in the car, I'll drive you to school. Lemieux couldn't help but mutter inwardly, but you're just a driver. In the past 6 months, Tony Stark, Lemieux, and the others had hardly left the house, and Happy had been stuck at home for over half a year as well. More than half a year of staying indoors, collecting a paycheck, naturally led to some weight gain. Training? Probably just going through the motions. Lemieux didn't meet with Happy often, but over the past 6 months, they'd gradually become more familiar with each other. The roads were clear, the sun was shining perfect weather. The car cruised along smoothly. Happy reached out and pressed a button on the console, switching the car's radio from rock music to the morning news. He figured the younger generation probably didn't enjoy those old songs from decades ago, much like how he himself wasn't fond of music from over 100 years ago. Lemieux leaned against the car window, quietly listening to the sounds of the wind, the hum of the engine, and the soothing voice of the female news anchor. Green trees and various American-style buildings passed by outside the window. It has been reported that the investigation into the plane crash that killed Obadiah Stane, a senior executive at Stark Industries, has been concluded by the FBI. The conclusion confirmed that the plane's engine failed due to metal fatigue in the engine's turbine blades, leading to the engine's disintegration. It was an unfortunate accident with no human factors involved. Obadiah, hey, time sure flies. It feels like just yesterday that they were fighting it out on the rooftop. Lemieux couldn't help but feel a little nostalgic. That battle had been truly dangerous, missiles flying around, bullets scattering, and flames and smoke engulfing everything. He had managed to escape death multiple times, narrowly evading the Grim Reaper's scythe. He had fought back in the face of certain doom, dancing with the angel of death, Gabrielle. One wrong move, and his career as a tentacle monster would have ended right there. War was war, life and death decided in an instant. He'd need to be more cautious in the future. The female anchor's report continued. After Tony Stark revealed his identity as Iron Man, Stark Industries has recently released new technology, sparking a new round of media frenzy. According to sources, the miniaturization of the arc reactor is expected to bring about numerous revolutionary changes for humanity's future. And now, a brief update. Last night, a panda at the San Mungo Zoo in California gave birth. Both mother and baby are healthy and doing well. Did I just hear that right? Stark Industries' new tech, the stock prices are soaring. Wait, what? Panda? It's a panda. Lemieux's attention immediately sharpened. He sat up straighter, excitement lighting up his eyes as little stars seemed to twinkle in his gaze. Plus 15 chapters on Patreon. Venom X Multiverse on Patreon. Cyberpunk X Genos on Patreon. In Deadpool on Patreon. Cyberpunk X David with System on Patreon. Yoriichi X Akame Ga Kill on Patreon. Naruto, Characters, X Fate Holy Grail War on Patreon. If you want to read 15 plus chapters ahead in unpublished fanfics, you can check out my Patreon or just take a visit. p.a.t.r.e.o.n http://patreon.com/kazuma_trash. Creators thoughts. Kazuma_trash. Like it. Add to library. Comment. 11 comment. Vote.